and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, hello and welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcast from columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. In a few moments' time, I'll be crossing live to Charlie Peters in Tel Aviv to get the latest on the Israel-Hamas conflict. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
Good afternoon, it's 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The UK has called on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. These are live pictures coming to us from Gaza, where there appears to have been several fresh strikes this afternoon, with black smoke seen billowing across the skyline. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the UK's Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation of violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
Tracks carrying aid have reached southern Gaza. It's after the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. Israel imposed a blockade preventing the delivery of food, water and fuel after the Hamas terror attack. The group says today's delivery won't be enough to change the catastrophic medical conditions on the Strip. In Cairo, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told the peace summit Palestinians need more help.
Full trucks on one side, empty stomachs on the other. Those trucks need to move as quickly as possible in a massive, sustained and safe way from Egypt into Gaza. A 20-truck convoy of the Egyptian Red Crescent is moving today. And I want to express my deep gratitude to Egypt for the essential role Egypt is playing in this regard. But the people of Gaza need a commitment for much, much more. A continuous delivery of aid to Gaza at the scale that is needed.
Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to continue to fight until all hostages being held by Hamas are freed. It's after 2 American citizens, Judith Raanan and her 17-year-old daughter Natalie, were released yesterday. Hamas says the decision was made on humanitarian grounds and was secured after an agreement with the Qatari government. It's believed more than 200 people are still being held by the terrorist group. In the UK, tens of thousands of Palestinian supporters are taking part in a march in central London. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. The demonstrators are making their way to Downing Street. Palestine Solidarity Campaign Director Ben Jamal says enough is enough.
We want the violence to end, so we're calling for an immediate ceasefire so that necessary humanitarian aid can be safely delivered to the people of Gaza. We are here today to assert the truth that violence will ultimately not end until you address the root causes of violence, and that is Israel's decades-long imposition of a system of military occupation and apartheid upon the people of Palestine. And we are marching to Downing Street to deliver a message to our political leadership that you need to end your complicit support for this system of oppression.
In other news, the Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. The Met Office has also issued a red weather warning for Aberdeenshire and Angus, which is due to end at 6 o'clock this evening. Recycling in England will be standardised from 2026. The plan will see homes, businesses and schools recycling the same materials. There will also be a once-a-week minimum food waste collection to reduce the amount going to landfill. It's all part of the government's drive to simplify the process. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car and on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now, let's return to Nana.
Thank you, Sophia. It's fast approaching 5 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up, the Rafah crossing on the Egypt-Gaza border is finally open as much-needed aid trucks make their way to the civilians in the besieged Strip. Meanwhile, Hamas released 2 American hostages for humanitarian reasons. We'll be speaking live to Charlie Peters, who is there in Tel Aviv, and bring you all the updates as they happen. Then stay tuned at 3:20. It's time for climate control. Storm Babette is actually upon us. Another symptom. Is it perhaps another symptom of climate change? And can we expect more of the same, or is it just simply weather? And for the former British infantry commander, Colonel Richard Kemp, is our political spotlight this week. He'll join us live from Tel Aviv to discuss what life is like on the ground in Israel as the war with Hamas continues. Then stay tuned at 5 o'clock. This week's difficult conversation. The former javelin world champion, Fatima Whitbread, yes, she'll be live in the studio. She'll be speaking to me about her childhood trauma and triggers and how she found a way out of a bad place thanks to sports. Of course, it was National Adoption Week, I think, last week, and she'll be talking about her situation too. That's coming up in the next hour, as ever. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. So world leaders are meeting in Cairo in a desperate plea for peace as expectation grows of an imminent invasion of the Gaza Strip by Israeli forces. Now, this comes as the IDF are now reporting that over 210 hostages are now being held by Hamas in Gaza. As the Rafah boarding crossing to Egypt opens for much-needed humanitarian aid. Let's cross live now to GB News reporter Charlie Peters, who's there in Tel Aviv. Charlie, talk to me about what the mood's been like there.
Well, as people in Cairo gather to demand peace and the Arab leaders there call for an immediate ceasefire, people in Israel are saying, how can we have peace if we allow Hamas, the terrorists who invaded on October the 7th and committed such appalling atrocities in the south, to continue to exist and flourish in the Gaza Strip. But last night there were reports of hostages being released, 2 Americans released, and now on their way back to rejoin their families. And this morning, further good news when finally, after days and days of urgent diplomacy, some humanitarian aid has been allowed to cross from Egypt into Gaza via the Rafah border crossing. Some 20 trucks loaded with medical supplies, equipment and food did cross into the Gaza Strip, where an urgent and untenable humanitarian situation has been occurring, according to the UN. But that border crossing has now closed, and as we understand, no foreign nationals were allowed to leave in a situation that the US Embassy described as chaotic. That was true as a grave understatement. People have been rushing towards that border crossing ever since the IDF launched their bombardments in the north of the Gaza Strip. But there is concern beyond this area as that convoy gathers on the border with armour and tanks of that likely imminent invasion. Tensions are still rising throughout the region. In southern Lebanon, the Lebanese Hezbollah have continued their missile and drone attacks on IDF troops, killing one. Last night, the IDF confirmed the death of a 22-year-old staff sergeant and recently released footage of them striking what they said were Lebanese Hezbollah terrorists on the south with their own drone strikes. Protests have occurred in Ramallah in the West Bank, in Beirut, in Baghdad, in Cairo, and in Amman in Jordan, as continued anger on the streets of the Arab world flares up after that explosion in a hospital in North Gaza on Tuesday. Both the IDF and indeed the US claiming that this was by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Last night we had news that the European intelligence agencies also share that assessment, and they also say that hundreds didn't pass, more like in dozens of deaths there instead of the original figure quoted by the Hamas-run health ministry. This is a region on an extremely tense precipice. They know that there will be an invasion of IDF forces into the Gaza Strip, but they don't know what will follow. Will Lebanese Hezbollah and other Iranian proxies launch further attacks on Hamas, or will the Israelis be able to enter the Gaza Strip without much response from the Arab world? Well, we do know they are going to evade, and we wait for that likely imminent invasion in the coming days.
Chai, I want to ask you about the Rafah crossing, because it's opened and people are able to cross. Are they allowing all citizens who want to cross over through it, or is it just foreign nationals, as was initially mentioned?
I think nobody's crossed. I think it's just been aid going in. There's the agreement to allow people to go out. We haven't had confirmed reports of that yet, but we do know that the embassies of the US in Jerusalem and Egypt have called on their nationals to head there in hopes that they may be allowed to leave. But for the governments of Jordan and Egypt, and indeed most other Arab powers speaking on this issue, for them it is a red line for any Palestinians to leave the Gaza Strip, because for them the idea of Arab solidarity is such that they believe any Palestinians who leave the Strip won't be allowed to re-enter. So it's highly unlikely that we'll see any refugees leaving the Gaza Strip, even if the situation there descends into even greater turmoil after that likely IDF invasion and greater use of munitions from the air as they seek to destroy the Hamas military capabilities.
Is the message not getting through? Because obviously we've now learned that most of the people think that that bomb that didn't actually hit the hospital, apparently it was a parking lot near it, was from a Hamas missile that kind of went wrong. Is that not getting through to the Arab world, that could potentially be the situation? Because, as you said earlier in your report, there's a lot of anger about that. And also we've learned that the numbers don't appear to be in the hundreds, but more like maybe the tens.
Yes, well, when that news was first reported, Hamas put out a claim almost immediately after the explosion, saying that the Israelis were to blame. And that claim caught on like wildfire throughout the Arab region. And it seems that what Arab leaders think in public and in private is probably very different, but they have very little room to maneuver because of the sense of anger on the streets. People in the Arab world, regardless of the information being released and the lack of compelling evidence or indeed any evidence being produced by Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, they are choosing to believe that Israel is responsible for that strike. And people have to just be realistic about that situation in the region. No matter how much compelling but not conclusive evidence is produced by the US, its allies and Israel, it seems as though the Arab world is continuing to believe that Israel is responsible for that strike and indeed many other devastating situations in the Gaza Strip since then. The Arab leaders who are reacting to this crisis, they want the siege to end. They want the Israeli invasion to not occur. And with the rage on their streets and the hundreds of thousands in gathering to protest and indeed set fire to some of the areas around Israeli and American embassies throughout the region, they have very little room to concur with assessments made by Western intelligence agencies. That is a crisis in the diplomatic efforts being made. And on top of those situations, we also are relying, between the Western powers and the Arab powers, interactions with Qatar to secure the release of more hostages. The IDF this afternoon revised the number up to 210 hostages now believed to be held in the Gaza Strip. It's been described as a humanitarian reason, the release of the 2 Americans last night. But the sense in Israel is that if you want to be humanitarian, release the 210.
Well, I suppose if they think that there's going to be a ground invasion, they probably won't. It is interesting that you talk about the Arab communities as not seeing that. I mean, it was actually, I was watching Al Jazeera, and actually watching Al Jazeera, they actually had a shot of the rockets being launched, and then it looked like something fell back. So, I mean, even on the TV, there's sort of aimed towards the Arab population. That did appear to show that it was in fact from Hamas's missile, but of course they will continue to talk about that. Charlie, you mentioned the hostages as well. Does it sound like they're going to be letting any more of the hostages go? Are they talking about that at all?
Well, there's a split in understanding on that situation in the region and in Israel in particular at the moment. Some people seeing the release of those 2 American hostages last night as a possibility for further diplomatic relations, for establishing further releases. Qatar is a long-standing mediator in these issues between Arab powers and Western powers. More recently, it facilitated the release of some children in the Ukraine-Russia war, and Doha acted again to release Americans held in captivity in West Africa. But at the same time, others in Israel believing that the release of those 2 hostages was a propaganda ploy by Hamas to try and delay that ground invasion. The sense here is that the invasion would actually be the humanitarian option, because it would reduce the need for airstrikes and allow for a more precise and targeted engagement with Hamas forces on the ground by the IDF, rather than the severe munitions that we're seeing being dropped on residential areas where the Hamas operatives engage and use civilians as human shields. So a split of opinion here, but either way, the conversation will continue about those hostages, and the IDF continues to stress that their release is an absolute priority as it seeks to defeat the Hamas military capabilities and rescue the innocents being held in the Gaza Strip.
Charlie Peters, thank you very much. Thank you so much for all those brilliant reports that you brought us live. Thank you. That is Charlie Peters, who's live in Tel Aviv. Interesting that Hamas are talking about releasing hostages on humanitarian, because of humanitarian means, when after what's actually gone on. But if you just joined us, welcome on board. This is coming up to 16 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, climate control as the UK is hit by heavy flooding caused by Storm Babette. We'll debate whether climate change is to blame for these extreme conditions, or is it just simply weather? This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Weeknights from...
Well, it's just coming up to 20 minutes after 3 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Now it's time, though, for Climate Control, where I unpick some of the latest stories relating to the debate around climate change. Storm Babette continues to batter the UK, with downpours having catastrophic effects in certain regions. 3 people have died and over 40,000 homes, have been left without power, as the Met Office warns of danger to life in some parts of the country. But is Storm Babette a symptom of climate change, or is it just simply weather? Well, I'm joined now by senior meteorologist at the British Weather Services, Jim Dale, also political commentator Lewis Perry. Right, I'm going to start with you, Jim. I don't know why you're not. You're next. You should be either side of me, because you don't agree with each other.
I am where I am, but I'm back again. I'm back again, so that's fine.
Well, go on then. Well, talk to me about Storm Babette then. What, is it a he or a she, and why is it here?
It's a she, named by the Dutch, but it's here because it travelled from the Canaries a couple of weeks ago, where they were having intense heat, record temperatures, both on land and around in the sea, and it gathered all that massive energy, and that energy started to move to the west of Spain, then the west of France, and it arrived here. It hit or was blocked by the high pressure over Scandinavia. This is the technical bit, if you like. And it's dumped nominal amounts of rain across many parts of the UK. You're seeing the pictures now. You use the word catastrophic. I'm going to say there is a climate change element to Storm Babette.
So you think there's a climate change element to it. Lois, what is your view on that?
Well, it's nice that Jim is saying element and that it's not all caused by us, because in the past, when you come on the show, Jim, you said that it's all human-made climate change.
I never say that.
I just wanted to... Well, you have. Or
you have, Jim. I'm sorry.
I haven't.
It's like, OK.
I know what I say.
No, I know what you say as well. Hold on. You have said it. You've blamed most of climate change. OK, well, I'll give you a chance to defend that.
Go on. Let Lois say what she's
Lois, finish off what you're saying, and then we'll come back to
OK, so I just want to make the point that, Jim talks a lot about the IPCC reports and documents, yeah? The actual documents, the actual report, not the summary or the press release, which is done not by scientists but by politicians and PR people with an agenda, has said definitively until extremely recently. I think the last report, the ones before that, said there was no evidence whatsoever of an increase in extreme weather events. And the most recent one said there may be a slight increase, but it was based on modelling, not actually looking at evidence. Because, of course, Jim, because you're a very technical guy, that things are done over a 30-year average, not because there's a storm or it's a bit hot somewhere else in the world. It has to be worked out and done over 30 years. And there is no increase in extreme weather events. And that's according to the IPCC, and NASA supplies their data.
Yeah. So, Jim, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, how bad does it have to get before Lois and maybe yourself actually says there is a climate change element within this? I mean, we've got to look globally, not just of what... This is our turn, if you like. The floods are our turn. You go and ask the people in those flooded areas of the UK, of which there are many, and it's building up, it's becoming a major, major story, 3 deaths. You ask them whether there's any climate change involved in this. Don't ask NASA, who are massively on side as far as what I'm concerned. And you know, the evidence is incontrovertible. It's as simple as that. The last 10 years particularly, all the graphs, all the temperature graphs, all the wildfire occasions, not all of them, but many of them, are unprecedented in what's going on. You had the floods in there as well. You've seen the pictures from Maui, from Derna in Libya. All of these things, just stack them together, join the dots, Lois. And, you know, do you know what? We have this conversation every week. Is it, isn't
Sorry,
it?
can you let Jim finish?
Yeah,
let Jim finish.
Isn't it? That's kind of immaterial. What we've got to get to an answer to is how we deal with this, irrespective of whether you believe it's man-made climate change or just natural
I'm sorry, I've got to pull you up on this, because you're moving away now from the notion that... I haven't finished talking, so you don't know what I'm going to say. But it does feel like you're moving away from the notion where climate change is man-made, and it sounds like you're accepting the narrative now that it isn't actually. Lois, respond, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jim, why did the monks in medieval England build floodplains?
Why did the monks go, sorry, where?
In medieval England, before fossil fuels were being used, why were floodplains built in medieval England? If there was
I don't know
no
where you're getting this one
Just
from.
answer the question.
I don't know where that one's come from.
Don't worry about
that. It's actually massively news to me that monks have suddenly arrived and done their bits 10,000 years ago, whenever it was. I don't know. I'm clueless as far as that one's concerned.
No, hang on. What, could you ask the question again? And Jim, do you know the answer or not? What is the question?
Ask the question again.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make is floodplains have always been created in the United Kingdom for thousands of years. Why would that be? Why do you think that's the case? You know, if it's all because of climate change that's man-made from fossil fuels, why was there the need to protect from floods 1,000 years ago?
Look, as well as the climate moving, the weather moves with it as well. That's part of the equation. You've got to differentiate between the two. And what you're not doing is exactly that. You've got to be able to do that. So, yes, of course, there are catastrophic weather events, pure weather events, that do occur from time to time. There are catastrophic climate-induced events that are also weather events, the add-on, if you like, that occur. And that's what's happening. That's what's being mapped on now.
What's happening? An add-on climate event or...
Yeah, the add-on. This Babette has got part of that inherent in the energy that was put in as it started to develop in and around the Canaries. I'm trying to explain it in a very simplified way, that energy goes into the atmosphere, and then the atmosphere can hold more water, and once it hits a barrier, such as the high pressure over Scandinavia, all that water falls out, and hey presto, you get the type of events that you're seeing now in the news, people being flooded out, deaths occurring, businesses ruined, all of that. You've got to start joining these dots, and we've got to start looking at the remedies for this and what we can do to best survive.
OK, so are you saying that the CO2 in the atmosphere caused this, was part of what caused this chain of events? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I am. Overall, yes, I am. It's part of the equation,
and when
not
you say,
the entire
when you say
equation.
part of the equation, what percentage would you attribute to it?
You can't...
I'm asking you, because you're saying part of it.
I'll give you the answer, and the answer is you can't say... You know, that's 10% or 12%. It's a portion of. That will vary depending on the event.
Is it a larger portion than half in your head, or a lesser portion than half in your head?
To be honest with you, that's a sort of silly question.
No, don't tell me my question. Listen, there's no silly questions. When people are asking you, you've made a statement. I'm asking you. You said a portion of it is climate change. So I'm saying, in your mind, how big is that portion?
I would say it's significant enough to cause what you're seeing now. That's where it is.
Can you give it, like... So I could say...
I think scientists cannot do that. They're not going to say this storm gave that and that's... You sometimes have to wait.
No, because you keep saying, if it's a teeny portion in your mind...
It's enough.
then that sounds like not very
Do you know
much.
what
Are you saying a big bid or a small bid?
OK, so this is what happens when you fill your bath. Up to the point of it overflowing, it's OK. And then you get that little teeny little bit that goes over the top, and it's not OK. That's exactly what happens with climate change. That's what we're seeing in all instances in terms of globally what's going on.
I've had enough of this.
Your technical ability to explain stuff, Jim, is overwhelming me about baths and overflowing and stuff. So the IPCC, they're wrong, are they? The IPCC are wrong when they say that there is no evidence of any more extreme weather events.
I don't even know where you get that information.
Close to finish.
Yeah, where's
Karen Lewis,
from?
sorry.
The reports, the actual reports, not the summaries, not the press releases. This isn't. I'll send it to you, Jim. That say that there's no very, very slight increase, very slight in extreme weather events. And if we're richer as a nation because we haven't bankrupted ourselves with net zero, we can protect ourselves with to protect ourselves from floods, things like that.
You're interested in protecting the cars and the vehicles. That's what you're interested in, the fossil fuel industry. That's where you are. You need to come back on side. We need a proper conversation about where we go with this next. Look at what's happening in the UK.
Well, I think,
look at what's happening around the world.
Isn't that what she's saying, though? Isn't that what she's saying?
The IPCC are somehow coming up with contrary information to what they actually are coming out with.
Well, let her tell you what she's saying. Sorry, tell us again what you're saying, Lois.
Sorry, the summaries that are written from the reports and then the press releases quite often bear very little resemblance or no resemblance to what's actually written in the report.
Do you know who writes the
Sorry, let her
reports?
finish.
Because there's a political agenda for the people that are doing the press releases and the politicians, and that has nothing to do with being green, and it's all about an anti-capitalist agenda. That's all it's about. If either you don't realise or you're complicit.
This is 100. I think it's 164 countries that put their name to this. This is the most countries of the world. These are eminent scientists that actually put these things out. They're not a couple of people sat in the back of a wardrobe pressing buttons like they do on Twitter or anywhere else.
The science is saying what I'm saying. I'm saying the summaries and the press releases, but they bear very little resemblance or no resemblance to the actual reports. It's well documented.
Lois, you need to look around. You really need to look around the world and what's going on. What's gone on in the last 2 years? I mean, every time there's an event, even in this country, for example, 2 years ago, 40 degrees. This June, the hottest June ever. This September, the hottest September ever.
Yeah,
we missed a couple in the middle.
Since when? How many years?
Since ever. You asked this question.
How many years?
Since modern times.
Since modern times. Listen, when I ask for a number...
OK, so around about 120 years.
So you're basing the whole climate science that you are talking about on 120 years of a planet.
That's when modern meteorology started to look at these things in a concerted way. That's when it started to happen. So if we're seeing so many peaks now... If we're seeing so many peaks now, and not just in this country, record after record after record falling in every country that you can think of. And just watch, I'd say this to you now, this is a little prediction. Watch 2024 with an El Niño running alongside climate change. You watch how that one's going to go.
I'm going to stop you both there, because I think I lost interest with El Niños. Jim Dale, thank you very much, Senior Meteorologist at the British Weather Services. And Lois Perry, Director of Car26, thank you so much. Keep your thoughts coming. GBviews at gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBnews. This is GBnews. Still to come. Aid trucks loaded with medicine and some food have entered Egypt's Rafah crossing with Gaza. We'll cross live to Israel to get the latest on the war against Hamas. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Sophia.
It's 3:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. The UK has called on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the UK's Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation in violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
In the UK, tens of thousands of Palestinian supporters are taking part in a march in central London. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the UK government stop supporting Israel's actions. The demonstrators are making their way to Downing Street. The Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. The Met Office has already issued a red weather warning, which means danger to life, for Aberdeenshire and Angus. It's due to end at 6 o'clock this evening. And you can get more on all those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now, it's back to Nana.
So stay tuned. On the way, political spotlight. I've got a big guest for you, Colonel Richard Kemp, who is live in Israel, who'll give us an update. And also Uri Geller will be telling us how things are going with him. Stay tuned. That's all on the way next.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. Coming up to 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel and Nana Akua. Now, this is something I wanted to talk about because I've been reading all about it. And when my bank said to me, "Oh, you can use your voice to access your account. I thought, this is a bit creepy. But is artificial intelligence being weaponised by scammers to trick people into sending them money? Now, that's exactly what's happened to a Florida investor called Clive. A software program impersonated his voice, trying to trick his bank into transferring money into the hands of fraudsters. And according to experts, as many as 500,000 video and voice dead fakes or deep fakes will be shared on social media this year. So should we be worried about AI stealing our identities? Well, joining me now is the lawyer and futurist Andrew Eborn. Andrew, my bank said, would you like to use your voice? I said, yeah, why not? I've changed my mind.
I think that's a very wise move. We are living in a very diseased information age at the moment, where AI can basically replicate anything that we can do. It can replicate your voice, your image, the way that you walk and so on and so forth. And it's really, really dangerous times. I often say it's our greatest human achievement, but also the biggest potential existential threat. And what I do, I talk around the world, as you know, about AI. I've just come back from Cannes, where I was hosting the Drama Awards, and it was front and centre, obviously, about actors and the writers' strike and so on and so forth, because everybody's afraid they're going to get replaced. And I think it was Goldman Sachs said 300 million jobs will be lost to AI. At the same time, we've got all sorts of wonderful revolutions in terms of medicine, in terms of what you can do with voices and properly licensed and so on and so forth. But you should be very scared. You need to understand how the technology works and harness that and make sure there are appropriate safeguards.
Because I remember I was listening to a thing about AI and the voice AI, and the reason why it sort of failed in the past was not because it was not able to replicate the voice, but because of the soundings in the background, which gave it away. So they fixed the soundings in the background. There was never a problem with the voice at all. And now it's a real thing. And I'm wondering why banks are actually offering it, knowing this. Because what insurance is there for someone like me? My voice is on lots of things. Anyone could easily take it and try and manipulate it. What assurances or what protections are
well, and that's the problem. And voice is the most difficult to identify as a fake. There are lots of fake videos out there. There are lots of fake pictures. And normally there are clues, giveaways. So there's the fake Pope, if you might remember, in a puffer. So devil may wear Prada, but the Pope likes a puffer. And you can tell because the fingers are not quite right or the glasses are a little bit distorted. But with voice, it's very, very difficult. And there's a wonderful lab called 11 Lab, which we've been working with the Royal Television Society. They came along and gave a talk. And you can basically replicate exactly somebody's voice, and you can also translate it in real time. So if you have a commentator, for example, do you remember Murray Walker used to do the racing?
Yeah.
He had wonderful, excited passion about the commentary. I went abroad many times, and some of the local commentators were a bit more pedestrian, let's put it that way. You could now have Murray Walker's voice in any language, and it would sound as though he's speaking as though he were a native. So it is really incredible. The dangerous thing is this, is that it can absolutely, in a matter of seconds, pick up all of your intonations and basically replicate those on a phone call. So if somebody phones up and says it's a long-lost relative or whatever, I've lost all my money using somebody else's phone, but you recognise the voice, you may well transfer money, which is a lot of what people have done. So very, very tricky.
Or they could replicate a family member.
Yeah.
So say, like, your son or daughter say, oh, come and pick me up, or come...
Absolutely.
And it's not really real.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was thinking...
But you've got to call them. What you need to do is you then call them and check.
Call the numbers. I would also recommend, we can do this on your show, you can be a campaign, people should have a safe word. Is that if you turn around and say banana or elephant or whatever you want to try and do is your safe word to make that make sense so that they know it's really you, we can make that make sense.
Or you could have a oobla, boobla, doobla, doobla, like as a safe...
I think that should be your safe word.
But then would the AI learn that? It would learn that.
Well, as long as you don't disclose to anybody else in anywhere that these devices can hear you listening and so on and so forth. So I would work on the basis, work out something secret. But it was, I told you, I mean, Equity, they've got the sort of Stop AI stealing the show because actors are so worried that they're going to lose, basically, their rights to do it. And you had Obi-Wan Kenobi, James Rodney Earl, who did the voice of Darth Vader. That was replicated by AI, but he basically licensed the right to do it. Tom Hanks, very recently, was in a dental plan commercial, which he didn't license, but it was a deep fake of him on that sort of basis. But you might get something like Bruce Willis, who can no longer act because of aphasia. And he basically licensed a Russian telecom company for millions of dollars to use his name and image. So it is possible, but you need to control exactly what's happening.
Andrew, thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to see you.
That is Andrew Eborn. He's there. He's a broadcaster and a lawyer and a futurist, and that's all AI. Right, let's return to Israel, because it's time now for this week's Political Spotlight, where this morning much needed flowed into Gaza. Lots of aid flowed there as trucks passed through the now open Rafah crossing in Cairo. Some of the major powers in the Middle East and Europe are actually meeting for a summit to discuss the ongoing war. But Israel, Iran and the US are not in attendance. Well, I'm joined now by the former British infantry commander, Colonel Richard Kemp, as well as the illusionist Uri Geller. Good afternoon to you both. I'm going to start with you, Colonel Kemp. So you are... Talk to me about what you're observing as you're there. You're there in Israel.
I'm in Israel. I've been here for a couple of weeks, and I've visited Israeli Defence Forces troops on the border with Lebanon and also on the border with Gaza, and there's intense preparations going on both fronts for potentially a land invasion into Gaza coming up soon, possibly, who knows, and also a large amount of forces up in the north preparing to defend against the Iranian-sponsored Lebanese Hezbollah, who have been carrying out, together with Hamas up there in Lebanon, have been carrying out attacks against Israel. So conflict is possible on either or both of those fronts, I think, in terms of both air and ground offensives. I've also visited a number of the communities close to the Gaza border, and I've visited Sderot, which is one of the towns worst hit, and also Kfar Aza, which is a kibbutz that was really badly hit. And there are scenes of horrific scenes there, which are really the reason why the IDF need to get in and destroy Hamas in Gaza. And they're certainly, from what I've seen, certainly ready to do so.
So those kibbutzes that you're talking about, were they the ones, were you talking about in Lebanon or in Gaza? Because I just got a bit confused as to where about you were talking about. So the kibbutz that you said was destroyed, was that in Gaza?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't explain myself well. I was talking about Sderot and Kfar Aza, which are two. One's a sort of town and the other's a kibbutz, right on the border near Gaza, but inside Israel, where Hamas carried out these horrific massacres at the weekend.
Now, you talked about the Lebanese border and how prepared are Israel with regard to... Because it doesn't sound like they're that worried about Hezbollah, but it sounds like the Israelis feel like they are strong and ready to tackle them as well. But this is a bit of a worry, because I know that some of the rockets that came from that side got through the Israeli security and their Iron Dome.
Yeah, I mean, there have been... the most effective missiles they've been firing from the north have been anti-tank missiles, which the Iron Dome can't deal with. They're sort of low-level direct fire missiles, and so there have been some casualties sustained from those. But I think it's wrong to say that Israel is not worried about that. It's a very concerning situation there. Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets pointing at Israel from southern Lebanon, and Israel knows that it might well have to deal with an air and ground war in Gaza, and potentially also an air and ground war, certainly an air war in southern Lebanon, to deal with these rockets.
Are there... Because it feels like Israel is surrounded on all the sides where it can be surrounded. It's surrounded by people who want to fight it. I mean, that's how I feel. And I'm looking at Israel thinking, how are they going to cope if all of these sort of factions turn against them? And of course, as you get further down, you've got Iran, which is a huge landmass and a massive country. And I am very concerned for Israel and its ability to deal with those things on all the different fronts that it may well have to deal with them.
I think Israel is ready to deal with all this. And one thing we haven't spoken about is the Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, where there's been an upsurge of violence there. There's always violence there, but there's been an upsurge since this war began. And that could turn very, very nasty as well. And there's plenty of IDF troops deployed inside there. Syria as well is another concern. Iran has proxies in Syria that it may try and use to attack Israel from. And we saw only yesterday, the Houthis in Yemen, who are sponsored and funded and armed by Iran also, firing drones and missiles from Yemen towards Israel, which were intercepted by the United States by a warship. So Israel is ready. Israel faces huge challenges, absolutely immense challenges. But certainly from my long-term knowledge of Israel and from what I've gleaned since I've been here now, Israel is ready, prepared, and will deal with it. It will be very painful and could be a very long conflict, but I have little doubt that Israel will be able to handle the situation.
Yeah, because, of course, you mentioned those cruise missiles that appeared to be on their way to Israel that were intercepted by the United States. That's a worry again. If a cruise... does the cruise missile hit the edge of the land or whatever? Because obviously these missiles, I'm presuming, these are in the sea, right?
These are drones, sort of UAVs of the sort that have been used, for example, Iranian-supplied drones fired at civilian population inside Ukraine, the same kind of thing. And they've been taken out. This volley that was fired from Yemen had been taken out by the US warship.
Wow.
And Israel, of course, had they not been taken out by that ship, Israel would have undoubtedly taken them out using its own air defences had they approached Israel. It's not the first time that the Houthis have fired weapons of some sort into Israel. I think the key thing, the major point I think we should remember is that Israel's facing a very, very tough fight, as you said, as you rightly said, and they do need our support. They can deal with this, but they need our support, and in particular, they need our support, I think, to back them in whatever they need to do. It's not going to be a pretty situation, and we've already seen some of the media, and I don't include GBNews in this, but we've seen some of the media in the West accusing Israel already of war crimes when those crimes have been committed. There's attempts to delegitimize Israel and to weaken Israel's fight, and this is motivated and pushed by Hamas and their supporters.
OK, well, listen, Colonel Kemp, thank you very much for talking to me. He's a former British infantry commander. Right, let's go live now to illusionist Uri Geller, who is there in Tel Aviv. It's where he lives, it's his home. Uri, thank you so much for joining me. It's so good to see you, so good to talk to you. I hope your family are all safe and well. Talk to me about what it's been like for you, because you live in Tel Aviv. This is your home, and you are actually at war. Israel is actually at war.
Yes. OK, half an hour ago, maybe more, 35 minutes ago, missiles were flying into Tel Aviv. Sirens, people run to shelters, because you never know where these missiles that are fired from Gaza are going to fall. Now, I just want to expand on what Richard said, and hi, Richard, I know Richard. You know, in the bigger arena of things, President Biden has warned Iran against escalating the war between Israel and Hamas into a broader regional conflict. But Iran warned Israel of escalation if it failed to end aggressions against Palestinians, with its foreign minister saying that other parties, this is very important, other parties in the region were ready to act. Now, as Richard said, more than two missiles were shot down that came out of Yemen towards Israel. I believe that some of those missiles and drones are precise. They can hit a precise target. And this is why it's so important to take them out before they hit our major cities. As we all know, there are American 2 aircraft carriers moored nearby. And let me tell you this, it is quite rare for 2 carriers, strike groups, to operate together. You know, the United States military has just 11 in total and deploys only a few at a time. This shows the urgency and the backup that America, hopefully England, Germany, and other countries are going to give Israel in case.
Yeah. Are you still there? We haven't lost you.
Through the region. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you just came back, yeah.
So this is a situation we're in, and I would like to correct your words, Nana, because you said that these forces, the enemy is, I'm quoting you, they're fighting us. No, they are actually out to destroy us. They are out to wipe Israel off the map. That's the situation we're in. We are powerful, we're strong, and like Richard said, I totally believe that we can handle all the wars from all around Israel, from all fronts.
The Israeli army are quite incredible, really quite incredible. I also noticed that a lot of people who are in North Israel, which is Tel Aviv, as I understand it, is the northern part of Israel. Some people have been moved out from parts of North Israel that are bordered onto Lebanon and other areas to ensure, because they're getting ready, Israeli troops are apparently getting ready to cross those borders as well. I mean, are you having to move or are you safe where you are?
No, the people who are being moved, Nana, are settlements in the south and some settlements and towns in the north of Israel.
Right.
They want to have a kind of a clear border for the Israeli army, navy, and air force to be able to act. But it is unbelievable. It's so surreal that we keep forgetting also, Nana, that Hamas murdered, slaughtered children, babies, men, women. They kidnapped over 200 people, including babies and children.
I mean,
while all this is going on, we kind of are forgetting what happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, no one has forgotten what's happened 2 weeks ago at all. It seems that families were slaughtered and killed in that. We have heard of families are completely wiped out. So you are correct in your analysis of what you said there. I mean, but we really have to try, because ultimately we all want peace, don't we? We want peace with the Palestinian people and with the Israeli people. We want peace. That's got to be the goal, but I don't think that is the goal of Hamas. I've read the covenant.
Israel always wanted peace and wants peace. By the way, I try to explain through my social media on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, what the truth is, what is really happening. Because I know what's going on in London, in New York, in Germany, in Berlin, these massive demonstrations against Israel.
Well,
so, Nana, I'll keep you informed. Every time you get me on the show, I'll let you know what's happening.
We'll try and get you on every week, Uri. Thank you so much for joining me. Uri Geller, the illusionist and general, brilliant legend there. He's there in Tel Aviv. He's keeping us updated. Well, stay tuned, because coming up, my amazing panel, columnist Lizzie Cundy and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Snyder. They're on the way next. Next up, my monologue.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to the rest of the day, the heavy rain across Scotland will finally begin to ease this evening. Elsewhere, it's actually also turning drier. We still have this area low pressure across the UK, so it will remain fairly changeable. Still the risk of a few showers, but thankfully, especially for Scotland, we start to lose the really heavy rain. So into this evening, you can trace that rain further northwards across the mainland parts of Scotland. Amber and red warnings will expire as we go through the course of the evening. So for most of us, as we go through the small hours of Sunday, it's a fairly dry picture. A few showers around, maybe also the odd mist and fog patch, and away from towns and cities, turning a little bit chillier compared to of late. So Sunday, we start off on a fairly bright note, any mist and fog quickly clearing. Still the risk of some showers, especially for Western Scotland, maybe parts of Western Wales, South West England too. But for many areas, it's a much brighter day. Some sunshine around, and certainly a day to take stock if you've unfortunately seen some flooding over the last few days. Temperatures for most of us around where they should be for the time of year, so around 10 to 12 in the north, potentially up into the mid-teens further south. Monday, we do start the day fairly dry, maybe quite chilly for Scotland. Northern Ireland, however, will see this heavy area of rain work its way in during the course of the day. That will spread its way further eastwards as we go through the course of next week, so staying unsettled for all of us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Well, Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Hey, good afternoon. It's just coming up to 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines with Lisa.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. The UK is calling on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly told the conference a concerted effort needs to be made to prevent the violence from escalating.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
Trucks carrying humanitarian aid have now reached southern Gaza. It's after the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. Israel imposed a blockade preventing the delivery of food, water and fuel after the Hamas terror attack. The group says today's delivery won't be enough to change the catastrophic medical conditions on the Strip. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told the Peace Summit Palestinians need more help.
Full trucks on one side, empty stomachs on the other. Those trucks need to move as quickly as possible in a massive, sustained and safe way from Egypt into Gaza. A 20-truck convoy of the Egyptian Red Crescent is moving today. And I want to express my deep gratitude to Egypt for the essential role Egypt is playing in this regard. But the people of Gaza need a commitment for much, much more. A continuous delivery of aid to Gaza at the scale that is needed.
Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to continue to fight until all hostages being held by Hamas are freed. It's after 2 American citizens, Judith Raanan and her 17-year-old daughter Natalie, were released yesterday. Hamas says the decision was made on humanitarian grounds and was secured after an agreement with the Qatari government. It's believed more than 200 people are still being held by the terrorist group. In the UK, tens of thousands of Palestinian supporters are taking part in a march in central London. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. The demonstrators are making their way to Downing Street. Palestine Solidarity Campaign Director Ben Jamal says enough is enough.
We want the violence to end, so we're calling for an immediate ceasefire so that necessary humanitarian aid can be safely delivered to the people of Gaza. We are here today to assert the truth that violence will ultimately not end until you address the root causes of violence, and that is Israel's decades-long imposition of a system of military occupation and apartheid upon the people of Palestine. And we are marching to Downing Street to deliver a message to our political leadership that you need to end your complicit support for this system of oppression.
In other news, the Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. London North Eastern Railway is advising people not to travel today because of severe disruption across the country. The Met Office has also issued a red weather warning, which means danger to life for Aberdeenshire and Angus. That's due to end at 6 o'clock this evening. Recycling in England will be standardised from 2026. The plan will see homes, businesses and schools recycling the same materials. There will also be a once-a-week minimum food waste collection to reduce the amount going to landfill. It's all part of the government's drive to simplify the process. Some breaking news to bring you. Sir Bobby Charlton has died at the age of 86. He was a key member of the England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. In a statement, his family said, Sir Bobby passed peacefully in the early hours of Saturday morning. He was surrounded by his family. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Just coming up to 6 minutes after 4 o'clock and just following up on the breaking news, it's just been announced that legendary England football player Bobby Charlton has died at the age of 86. Our reporter Ellie Costello looks back at his life and career.
The greatest moment in English football. Sir Bobby Charlton following captain Bobby Moore to collect the 1966 World Cup trophy from the Queen at Wembley. The defining moment in the career of one of England's greatest footballers.
I'm a football romantic. I love football. And there are millions like me, to which this place is the focal point of the whole world. You know, you speak to people like Pelé, and Beckenbauer, and the highlight of their careers was when they played at Wembley for the first time.
Born the son of a coal miner in Northumberland in 1937, Bobby said the only choices open to him were the mines, the navy, or football. Thankfully for the world, he pursued the latter. Charlton's death leaves Sir Geoff Hurst as the only surviving member of the team that won the World Cup. At just 20 years old, a young Bobby Charlton was one of the Busby babes involved in the 1958 Munich air crash. He survived, although 23 lives were lost, including those of 8 United team members. Up until his own death, he remained the last surviving member of that crash.
A fine centre, and Bobby Charlton slams the ball home.
Bobby Charlton was named in the England squad for 4 World Cups. At the time of his retirement from the England team in 1970, he was the nation's most capped player, having turned out 106 times at the highest level. With 249 goals, he was Manchester United's highest all-time goal scorer for more than 40 years. He was also England's highest goal scorer for 45 years. In a glittering career, Sir Bobby won 3 league championships, an FA Cup and a European Cup with Manchester United. He remained a director at the club for many years.
Bobby Charlton was the player who gave us that elite world-class quality which enables you to go and win tournaments. And don't forget the soccer school. David Beckham was brought to the attention by his participation and involvement in the Bobby Charlton Soccer School.
In 1994, Charlton became Sir Bobby when he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth, and he continued to act as an ambassador for British sport.
I'm a footballer and just tried my best and hoped that my ability was good enough to get me some success, which I've been lucky enough to have done.
He helped to promote London's successful bid for the 2012 Olympics.
This is such a fun place, and people love London. People love London, and we get them here, and we'll give them such a fantastic time.
In his personal life, Bobby Charlton married his wife, Norma Ball, in 1961. They had 2 daughters, Suzanne and Andrea. In November 2020, it was revealed that Sir Bobby Charlton had been diagnosed with dementia, as did several of his 1966 teammates. He stepped back from public life and has rarely been seen in recent years. Sir Bobby Charlton will remain a name synonymous with the beautiful game.
Sir Bobby Charlton, who died today. You just joined me, welcome on board. It's just coming up to 10 minutes after 4 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Now, Labour were dealt a double by-election blow to Rishi Sunak this week, overturning 2 huge Conservative majorities in Tamworth and Mid-Bedfordshire. Sir Keir Starmer claimed Labour was redrawing the political map by taking seats which had been comfortably Conservative ahead of the general election expected next year. Well, what could this mean for the Prime Minister? Is he marching his party towards a 1997-style wipeout or worse? So joining me to discuss this further is Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, Professor Sir John Curtis. Sir John Curtis, so could this mean, does it feel like this is a sign that Sir Keir Starmer is a dead cert to win the next general election?
Oh, dead cert's far too strong. I think what we can say is that if we draw the historical parallels, both in terms of the standings of the parties in the opinion polls and the results of by-elections, then a year out from the next general election, or at least potentially a year out, it looks as though the Conservatives find themselves in at least as difficult a position as they were in a year before the 1997 general election. Yes, the 2 opinion polls on Thursday both had swings of 20% or more to Labour. The last time we had those kinds of swings were before the 1997 general election. And the question is therefore whether Rishi Sunak can achieve what John Major wasn't able to achieve in the 1990s, and that is to turn things around. Now, the answer to that is not in any sense a dead cert, but certainly I think the Conservatives probably do need to understand that unless things do change, they are staring defeat in the face, and potentially at least quite a serious defeat.
But could it not be argued that the two by-elections, so one, of course, Nadine Dorris's old seat and the other one, Chris Finch's seat, that the fact is that these particular MPs didn't leave on a very... Well, it wasn't really great, was it? And so people potentially looked at that and thought, oh, God, I'm sick of these people specifically, and perhaps the people that they voted for were actually great people rather than the fact that they were assigned to a certain party. Could that not be nearer the mark, or do you think it's...
Well, sure. There are 2 points I think one can make a response to that. The first is that there are now, if we're going to argue that the Conservative Party has been losing by-elections heavily in this parliament because of local circumstances, it seems to be suffering an awful lot of local circumstances. And perhaps in the end, a whole load of local circumstances begins to add up to an impression to the public of a party with whom perhaps they shouldn't necessarily have faith. I think that's point number one. We're now being asked to, for example, if you take the Selby by-election as well, being asked to accept that lightning has managed to strike 3 times in the same place. But also, of course, I would point out that there is a commonality between Mr. Pincher and Ms. Dorries, and that is they were particularly associated with the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. And if we want to date the moment from which the Conservative Party fell behind the polls, behind Labour, and began to hit trouble, the truth is it's the revelation of the Partygate gatherings in December 2021. That's the moment Conservatives fell behind in the polls. And the truth is, if you look at some of the polling and you ask people, what do you think the Conservatives have done badly in the last 13 years? Those lockdown parties are still up there in the top 5 or 6. So the truth is the local circumstances to which you refer are part of a broader story of one of 2 party leaders in whom the public have now long since decided they don't have a great deal of confidence.
Well, what about the emergence of the Reform Party? Because the votes that the Reform got, had they gone to the Conservative Party would have won the seats marginally, but they would have won the seats. So could it not be a lot to do with the emergence of the strength of the Reform Party as well?
Well, we certainly should bear in mind that the Reform Party has been gathering at around 6% of the vote now in the national opinion polls for quite a while. Indeed, some people have been saying, that actually their performance in parliamentary by-elections hasn't really matched that. And I think one could even still say the same of that about the 2 by-elections in Thursday. I mean, only just getting over 5% of the vote in a constituency, Tamworth, where 2/3 of people voted Leave in 2016, is perhaps rather less than you might expect given that poll standing. That said, I mean, however well Reform are doing, and certainly 3, 4, 5% in the by-elections is now becoming commonplace. Sure, virtually all of these people are people who voted Leave in 2016, and therefore we can reasonably surmise are at least people who voted Conservative back in 2019. And that insofar as, one of the other problems the Conservative Party faces is that there is a fair degree of discontent with how well Brexit is going. Of course, yes, amongst a lot of Remainers, but also amongst a lot of Leavers. Now, some of those are people who've said, well, you know what, I'm not quite sure it was such a good idea after all. They're particularly concerned about the economic consequences, and they are the kinds of people who in some instances have gone off to Labour. But sure, there are others who feel that Brexit has not been implemented properly, that we've not taken full advantage of the opportunities that they think that it creates. And Reform UK are clearly a potential source of a way of expressing that view. And yes, there is no doubt that this is one of the Conservative Party, it has to worry about losing votes, as it were, to its right as well as to the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. Although, of course, I guess what the Conservatives might hope, and one of the ways in which they might begin to be able to get their vote figures up, is that perhaps when a general election is more firmly in view, that some of the people who are saying they will vote Reform will decide in the end, better the devil you they know, rather than casting a vote for a party that at the moment at least doesn't look as though it's got much chance of winning any seats.
All right. Well, listen, Professor John Curtis, thank you so much for your views. Thank you for joining us. He's a Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Right, well, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel, broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former advisor to the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, I was going to call you. But
Jeremy Corbyn?
You're not. What is your name?
My name's James Schneider.
Gosh.
Right, so let's start with you, James, then, seeing as... What do you make of this, then, this defeat in the by-elections? I mean, for the Conservative Party, I think most people expected it. But actually, they didn't. The Labour Party didn't win by that much, if you look at it.
I mean, the swings are massive. The swings are absolutely massive.
The swing is massive, but the difference in votes is...
Sure, but they went from huge, massive majorities to losing in historic swings. I mean, there's no way that you can get around that. And then you can ask, why has that happened? And, I mean, I think... because most people in the country are worse off than they were 13 years ago, the Tories are going to lose. And the Tories are going to lose next election, whoever they have as the leader, because if that's the record you're standing on, it's very hard to win on that basis.
Yeah, but it was only at a time. I mean, like, it was a couple of thousand here and there.
Sure, but they went from getting 60% of the vote in the general election down to 30 or in the high 20s. So that is a massive drop. Like, by any objective measure, the Tories got hammered in both of those by-elections.
Well, I don't know whether you can say that, because last time, so the turnout for one of them was like 65%. This time the turnout was underneath 40%.
What would your definition of hammered be?
Let me just finish. So if that's the case, and so the Labour Party didn't really get many extras, but the Tory Party actually lost votes, so they didn't get any votes, literally. And the argument was that their voters stayed away, which may well be true, but the fact is the turnout was almost half of the turnout for the...
Yeah, and turnouts of by-elections are normally low. I mean, these were...
But it's dropped from, like, 65% just under...
Yeah, and generally turnouts for by-elections are low, and it's true that there's not great, huge, surging enthusiasm for people voting for Labour, but there is no way that you can sugarcoat this. No party should be losing a by-election on such an enormous swing. So you can say...
Yeah, I hear you, but Labour didn't really increase their vote, really, did they? So what happened was the Tories didn't get any votes, more like. I mean, whilst you say the share was great, and you know, but the point is, the turnout, you have to factor that in as well with your...
Yeah, and I think we're all saying the same thing.
I don't think we are.
Well, the Tories are going to lose the next election because people don't want to vote for them. You're saying people don't want to vote for them, and well, not that many other people have voted for Labour, which is fine.
I've not said any of that. I said exactly the words that I'm using are that you have to factor in the fact that the turnout was almost half of what it was before, and so whilst Labour did get the votes, the Tories didn't actually. The Labour Party didn't really increase their votes, but the Tory Party didn't get any votes.
But there's not a single Tory Party strategist or Tory Party politician who's looking at those election results and going, "Oh no, don't worry, chaps. There's a way back." I mean, people don't want to vote Tory because most people are worse off than they were 13 years ago, and that's what we're seeing in by-election after by-election, and we'll see that again in the general election.
All right, Lizzie Cundy.
Right. Well, I deal in facts. You know, I like a statistic. OK, so we're looking at Tamworth. That was a 23.9% swing to Labour. Mid-Bedfordshire was 20.5% swing to Labour. The turnout wasn't very good with the voting. But what we've learnt from this is that people weren't voting for, I'm afraid, your man, Keir Starmer, because, you know, they don't like him. They're just disillusioned by the Tory party. A lot of people now are in the political wilderness wanting to vote Tory, but they're not, you know, Conservatives aren't Conservatives anymore. There's like cigarette paper between Labour and Tories, and that's the problem. And I'm afraid, look, Keir Starmer is no Blair. He hasn't got the charisma. He hasn't got the policies. We saw from his speech at the Labour Party, a load of big noise, but no substance, no policies. And I'm afraid to say he just, you know, he's saying we're going to win. You know, remember Neil Kinnock? Remember those words? And he kept saying growth. I mean, I thought I was listening to Liz Truss for 1 minute. No policies to stimulate growth. And he used words that Theresa May even used, stable and strong government. And look what happened to Theresa May in 2017. Just a little reminder.
With her little kitten heels and that funny dance that she did. Never again, never again.
Well, I've got to just say, look, he is Captain Flip-Flop and he does more U-turns. And I'm sorry, I said it last week, I'll say it again, he doesn't know what a woman is. And I think that's a big factor.
I think that's a big problem as well. I think that they are underplaying the relevance and how important that is for people like me. You know, if I was to think that I'm not going to go vote Conservative, I would be looking at that thinking, well, I just couldn't vote Labour, because I'm not happy with the whole stance on gender. I'm not happy with the fact that they are talking about making it easier for people to self-ID. You know, that doesn't work for me either. I'm concerned that people are sort of brushing that out of the way, and I don't want them to. I think it's very important.
Well, you might think that. I don't think very many people will decide their vote on that basis.
You don't think so? He's erasing women. There's a war on women.
Yes, yeah. And I said, you might, but I think not very many people do, and I think that's also borne out in the evidence from the voting so far. But, I mean, I'm not saying that these big by-election wins are big endorsements of Keir Starmer and his direction of the Labour Party and their policies they're putting forward, because, as you rightly say, there really aren't any. But this is how hated the Conservative Party are, because, I should repeat, most people in the country are worse off than they were 13 years ago, that just a man standing next to him wearing a different colour tie going, well, I won't do things that much differently, gets big votes because of how badly the Tories have run the
I just want to give you a little fact. Can I just say, not one time in history has Labour left us in good stead.
I'm going to return to the breaking news, because it's just been announced that legendary England football player Bobby Charlton has died at the age of 86. Joining me now is GB News presenter Paul Coit. Hello, Paul. So, Paul...
Yes, good afternoon.
What a legend, Bobby Charlton. I mean, we knew that he wasn't well, so we know that he's been ill for a while. But he truly was a legend. And, you know, what are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are that I've got to tell you, I hate that phrase when people say, oh, they use the word legend far too much. But this man was truly one of the greats of English football, without any doubt. If we even go back to 1958, at the age of 20, and he survived the air crash that took so many Manchester United players back in February 1958. Then he was part of the Busby Babes, which was the Matt Busby team that seemed the greatest team that this country had ever seen. It was decimated by that terrible crash in Munich. Then he went on, and then Manchester United rebuilt. He joined England, played 106 times for England. There we are, the World Cup, the great World Cup in 1966, which he was a huge part of. He was up till just obviously recently, there was only 2 left, and now there's only Sir Geoff Hurst that's left in that team that's still alive. But then went on 1968, went on to win the European Cup and retired in 1973, but truly one of the greats. And then not only that, but a great ambassador to football after that as well, for Manchester United and for England. There you can see him with Gareth Southgate, always time for everybody. And also, as great as he was, and I met him a few times as well, just one of these sort of people that always had time for everybody, feet on the ground, but a true legend of the game. And we will see black armbands. We'll see tributes to Sir Bobby Charlton, because he is truly one of the greats of British football, and a real loss. And as you said, he'd been unwell for some time, which is very sad, but passed away this morning at the age of 86.
Yeah, very, very sad news, but an absolute legend. Thank you so much, Paul, for your thoughts. That's Paul Coit. He's a GB News sports presenter. Well, it's just coming up to 24 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News, and it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, was ditching Boris the Tories' biggest mistake? Now, 2 of the safest Tory seats in the country have turned red, with Labour overturning huge majorities in by-elections in Mid-Bedfordshire and also Tamworth. The results are a major blow to the Conservatives, throwing the party into a further state of turmoil, as many point the finger at Rishi Sunak for the losses. Now, experts are saying that Boris's Partygate scandal and Truss's mini-budget fiasco could also be to blame for the wipeout. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, was ditching Boris the Tories' biggest mistake? Right, so joining me now to discuss, Emma Burnell, political consultant, Neil Hamilton, leader for UKIP, Reem Ibrahim, she's a communications officer for the Institute of Economic Affairs. Right, I'm going to start with Reem, because you're here in the studio. Reem, was it their biggest mistake?
I don't think it was their biggest mistake. Their biggest mistake was not being Conservative enough. And actually, when we're thinking about the way in which the leadership elections of last year have played out, the Conservative Party have entirely lost direction. We saw effectively an identity crisis. The Conservative Party don't know what that definition of conservatism actually means. Many of them can't define what a woman is. Many of them can't decide what the tax burden should be. Let's be very clear about this. We currently have the highest tax burden since the Second World War. Higher taxes now than we did under the Labour governments of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So really, I think this is their own doing. Boris Johnson himself, let's be honest, who really was in power, it was Prime Minister Carrie Johnson with her environmentalist net zero policy.
Well, you don't know that, though. You don't know that. And also, it was not actually the Conservatives who couldn't say what a woman was. That was actually the Labour Party who, and it took Sir Keir Starmer 2 years to finally get to the bottom of it. Emma Burnell.
Well, actually, the initial gender recognition bill was brought forward under Theresa May's government. It's worth remembering that both parties have had a mess on this. It was not the biggest mistake. It was probably.
Sorry, Emma,
the
could
best
you move back a little bit back from your mic, because it's sort of pitting a bit? Try again there. Try.
How's that? Is that better?
Much better.
Sorry. Yeah, it wasn't their biggest mistake. It was possibly the only thing they could have done. What we're forgetting is that Boris's entire government resigned. He could not form a government. Ministers wouldn't work with him. And the reason was he kept lying to them. He was caught, I said this at this time. No, you didn't. I'll change your story. Change your story while I'm on the television, embarrassing the hell out of me. You cannot run a government that way. And the other thing is, OK, Boris was polling higher than Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss. Liz Truss basically crashed, as well as the economy, the Tories polling. So ultimately, and Rishi Sunak has not been able to bring it back from that. He never will. He's not the guy that's going to manage that. But I don't think Boris would manage that either. All you'd have had is a continuing scandal after scandal after scandal. It might not have fallen off a cliff quite as quickly, but it was still going in that direction. And we'd have had the last year, you'd have had him being found and falling under a recall petition as Prime Minister. That's the only difference that you'd have had.
You think? Neil Hamilton, what do you think?
Oh, well, the one thing we do know about Boris is he certainly knows what a woman is. But I don't think that, that's the central issue here. I agree with my fellow panellists that the big problem for the Tory party is that over the last 13 years, they've serially failed to deliver Conservative policies over the whole range of government. Migration is completely out of control. It's not just illegal migration. The Tory government issued 1.2 million residence visas last year to people who have arrived in this country legally. We got the highest level of taxation since the Attlee government because the government under Boris Johnson locked the country down 3 times and effectively destroyed the economy and wrecked public finances. Rishi Sunak and certainly Boris Johnson are completely signed up to the mad eco-objective of the Greens, which is the largest transfer of wealth from the poor to the rich in my lifetime, and which is deliberately designed to make the British economy less productive. So we've got to double the infrastructure for electricity generation because we need backup power when the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine. We could go on and on and on.
Well, please don't.
This is nothing to do with personalities, it's about policy.
Well, listen, but come on. Boris Johnson secured an 80-seat majority, and whilst people were going on about Partygate, I mean, you've got to actually acknowledge that a lot of the media, BBC, Sky News, perpetuated this whole narrative of Partygate, and they were obsessed by it. When Keir Starmer had his Beergate, people didn't want to know. It seemed like they'd let him off. So Boris Johnson did secure a huge majority. Emma.
I think he's got natural facts.
Emma.
He'd been found not to do anything wrong. Boris Johnson's number 10 Downing Street was the most fined place in the country. That's the difference. And honestly, they weren't obsessed with it. They were reporting. It's their job. We are here as a media to hold truth to power. And if we can't say that saying that people who are in Downing Street setting the rules, breaking those rules, is exactly that job of the media, then I don't know what we're all doing here.
Well, Keir Starmer may well have been found innocent, although he did lie on many occasions. I mean, this is not me saying it. He claimed it wasn't a party or that there was an impromptu gathering. It turned out it wasn't. He said that only a few people were there, and it turned out there were at least 30 or whatever it was. He made a load of stuff up as well, and lots of other people are being found out with that. So, in summary then, Emma, do you think that losing... Emma, so do you think...
One was fined and one they were not. And that's the bottom of that story.
Yeah, that was all a bit iffy as well. That was all interesting there as well. But Emma, so would you say that losing Boris was their greatest mistake? And if not, what was their greatest mistake in your view?
No, Boris is a symptom. Their greatest mistake, frankly, was the 2010 emergency budget, bringing in austerity.
Just one.
Cutting and cutting and cutting. So
just one. just one, Emma. That's enough. All right, Neil, what do you think then? Was losing Boris their biggest mistake? And if so, what was their biggest mistake?
The biggest mistake were undoubtedly the lockdowns and the economic consequences of those. It's the economy stupid. Remember what
and Reem,
I've got to say I agree. I think that the Conservative Party's biggest mistake is having absolutely no ideological direction.
Crikey, thank you very much. So nobody thinks that they should have kept Boris. Emma Burnell, thank you very much. Neil Hamilton, also Reem Ibrahim, thank you for your thoughts. Right, this is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. On the way, we'll continue with the Great British Debate, and I'm asking, was ditching Boris the Tories' biggest mistake? And is there any way back for the Tories? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Lydia Cundy, also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. And still to come, this week's difficult conversation with Fatima Whitbread. She'll be live in the studio. But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Lisa.
It's 4:31. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. The UK is calling on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation in violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
In the UK, the Met Police estimates up to 100,000 people took part in a pro-Palestinian march through central London. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. Sir Bobby Charlton has died at the age of 86. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. In a statement, his family said Sir Bobby passed peacefully in the early hours of Saturday morning. The Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. The Met Office has also issued a red warning, which means danger to life for Aberdeenshire and Angus. It's due to end at 6 o'clock this evening. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
Coming up, royal biographer Angela Levin will be live in the studio with the latest from behind the palace walls in my royal roundup. But up next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, was ditching Boris the Tories' biggest mistake? And is there any way back for the party? I've got a poll up right now on Twitter asking you that very question. Send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnewscast. Your vote now.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
38 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, was ditching Boris Johnson the Tories' biggest mistake? Now, Labour have overturned huge majorities in by-elections in Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth, delivering a major blow to the Conservatives. So Keir Starmer says that Labour are redrawing the political map as many Tories point the finger at Rishi Sunak for the losses. The last time the Conservatives saw huge electoral success was when Boris Johnson delivered a huge majority of over 80 seats in 2019. So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, was ditching Boris Johnson the Tories' biggest mistake, and is there any way back for them? Right, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Lizzie Cundy, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it was the worst thing ever, and I think they're all regretting it, even probably Rishi is. I mean, let's be honest, he's in Egypt by the Nile, and he's in denial, I think. To be fair, look, Rishi got in, he parachuted his way in to number 10, backstabbing...
Well, the parachute didn't take him back up?
Yes, he's so light and little, I'm surprised it didn't. But he parachuted his way in, backstabbing his, you know, colleague, friend, in the worst way. And I don't think the Conservative Party or us, the British public, can ever forgive him for that. And I'm sorry, the man has no backbone. As I said, he's like a jellyfish in Prada pants. He has not got the political will to do anything. I mean, he gave us all of his 5 pledges. None of them have actually worked. I mean, the boats, I was saying, is that in plural? Because I don't think he's stopped one boat, has he? I mean, the amount of money that we're spending on all of the immigration, I mean, it's $3 billion a year. It's absolutely awful, and I'm sorry. I think if Conservatives got rid of Rishi, we'd have a standard chance. I think get Nigel Farage. Look at the welcome he got at the Conservative conference party. I mean, seriously, get Nigel back in. I think Conservatives would win it. But we've only got a year. He's with Reform. But come on, Richard, just join in. If you know, because I really am worried if Labour, you know, they think they are getting, you know, going to win. Keir Starmer as our Prime Minister. I really... That thought...
I can't bear the thought
I can't bear the thought of it. And the woke nonsense...
James, you're not a fan of Keir Starmer either, are you?
No, on the basis that he's not going to change things terribly much, and we need things to change really rather a lot because, you know, most people in the country are worse off than they were 13 years ago, which is that if you want to look at the biggest mistakes the Tories have made, it's every single policy along the way from George Osborne and David Cameron in 2010 onwards that have meant that the overwhelming majority of people are worse off. That's fundamentally why...
But if you're going to do that, you should start with what happened with the Labour Party when they left hardly any money in the kitty and told us that there was no money left. I mean, that's how they left the economy.
Yes, except that's not actually true, though, is it?
So that's a made-up thing that...
No, Liam Byrne left a little silly note, but Liam Byrne is, you know, I nearly said a little silly guy, and then I thought maybe I shouldn't be so rude, but actually I should be perhaps even... no.
But the point is that the Labour Party did not leave the situation, the economy in a good situation. Let's be honest here. We were in... Because of it, we had to deal with austerity, which the Tory party then had to take on board. And
did not have... Hold on. Did not have to take on board. Austerity was shooting ourselves in the foot. It was not an economic necessity. It was a political choice.
But didn't that come from the Labour Party? Wasn't that how they...
The political choice could have been made differently. We could have
but that's not the question I'm asking. Yes, I agree with you. They could have done something. The Tories could have done something differently.
Right.
But let's get something straight. Hang on. No, let's get something straight. How did the Labour Party leave the economy when they were last in office?
In a better state than it is now.
Was it in a better state than when they received it?
Yes.
No.
No, it wasn't.
Hold on. OK. No, it's not a straightforward lie. Right. No. Hold on. Please. Please. OK. Right. Now, I am very, very far from a supporter of New Labour.
Yeah.
But if your producers want to pull up the statistics and we can show them on the screen, the average income of people in the UK in 1997 was below what it was in 2010. 2010 was higher than it was in 1997. If you want to pull up the average income of people now versus 2010, you'll see it's lower. So on that basis, on that straightforward, factual basis, you can say that the things were better off for most people in 2010 than they were in 1997.
This is just after the crash, after the subprime fiasco, the banking crash, which left us all quite in a very bad way under the Labour Party.
Yes, but please stop treating me like I'm a spokesperson for Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, because I'm not. I'm a far harsher critic of the policies that led to the financial crisis than any Conservative, than yourselves, than anyone else in this building, I would imagine. So I'm not trying to defend the policies of New Labour, but if we're going to be factual and if we're going to be... What is the biggest mistake the Tories made? It wasn't coming to power in 2010. That is an obfuscation. The greatest mistakes that they made are all of the mistakes that they made themselves from 2010 onwards. So it's not the fault of the previous Labour government for all of its flaws, and I'm very happy to talk day and night about its flaws, right? It's not their fault that the Tories did austerity. It's not their fault that they decided to cut corporation tax while cutting the incomes of the majority. It's not the fault of the previous Labour government that the Tory government, for example, cut capital investment in schools, so we've got schools that are falling down.
No, I'm not...
None of these things are to do with Labour. These are decisions that the Tory party has made.
I'm not saying that the Tory party made good decisions. I'm not... Again, you are now treating me as a spokesperson for the Tory party. I am not supporting the Tory party in any way, shape or form. I think they've done an absolutely disastrous job. It's embarrassing. But I'm just not letting you sort of get off the hook by saying that the Labour Party did a good job and left the economy in a good state. It was in a mess when they handed it over. But the mistakes that the Tory party made are obviously not the Labour Party's fault.
And there's not one time in history have the Labour Party left this country in a better place. There isn't.
What do you mean?
They haven't been left in a better state. I mean, Blair and Gordon Brown.
You think the country was in a worse state in 1951 than it was in 1945?
We have had a pandemic, which there were many issues. I agree, I'm not a spokesperson for the Tory party, but what they did do wrong was have a divided Tory party, and no one wants to vote for a party that's not united, and that's the fault of the Tory party and Rishi Sunak.
Right, well, listen, the show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices. Their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. Let's go over to Bristol. Let's have a chat with the fabulous Lee Harris. Lee, what do you think? Was ditching Boris their biggest mistake? Was that the start of the cascade of all the horror that we've seen in front of us?
That's exactly how I was going to describe it. I would say 100% yes. You know, ditching Boris will go down in history as one of the biggest mistakes that Conservatives have ever made. But, you know, Boris is long gone, and his removal is certainly not the reason they're doing badly now, but it set off a specific chain of events that has caused existential damage to the Conservative Party. And they're still paying the price for it now. And what's so frustrating now, I know you think the same, is that he didn't really need to go. And it was all completely predictable. It was all completely predictable. You know, don't get me wrong, right? Boris was not perfect, and there are things that I don't agree with him on, like HS2 and net zero. But there's absolutely no doubt that he was able to connect to the public like no other politician, especially in the Red Wall, who voted for him in large numbers, some voting for the first time in their lives, all because of Boris. You know, as the excellent Michael Portillo said on GB News, Nana, Boris, I'll quote, Boris is an epic election winner. He's one of the finest politicians that I've seen in the years I've been around. That's what the Tories need to remember. Now, as usual, he's completely correct. But the Tory Wets, led by Sunak and Hunt, clearly didn't care about any of that, and they booted him out anyway. And since then, it's been managed decline, mostly weak, non-conservative policies and high-tax Hunt. But having said all that, and I'll finish on this because I honestly, you're going to shut me up, Nana. Having said all that, looking at the results of all the recent by-elections, people are definitely not rushing out to vote Labour. They're barely winning more votes than they did in 2019. And in Bedfordshire, for example,
exactly.
They won even less votes than they did in 2019.
Well, that's what I pointed out.
Running, exactly. They're winning by Labour, winning by default.
So in summary then, it was because that was the beginning of the end. Lee Harris, thank you very much. That's Lee Harris, our Great British Voice there in Bristol. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way in the next hour, it's time for the Great British Debate. I'm asking, is Biden fit to be leader of the free world? But next, it's my weekly Royal Roundup with royal biographer Angela Levin.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. If you've just tuned in, where on earth have you been? This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, there's always something going on in the royal household, and this week has been no different. On the menu, Prince Harry's reportedly been looking for a base for his family in the UK and house hunting near London. Really? Every Saturday, I love to give you a rundown, and who better to do so than royal biographer Angela Levin. Right, so we've got to get stuck in with Harry. Is he actually, is this serious, that he thinks he wants to come back here after everything he's said?
No, I think there's a bit of duplicity there, really.
Do you?
Yes, I do. I think, you know, Meghan doesn't want to come back to the UK ever because it's too small and not interesting. She thinks globally. Harry, I think, wants to come back because he can do it without asking his father. He can buy a house and he can actually then try and get protection 24/7. Because he'll be around, even though he's not actually working.
At the expense of the taxpayer?
On the expense of the taxpayer, yes. And people are saying he now wants to be friendlier with the family and think about where the children's going. I think it's a nonsense. I think, in a way, that they wanted to move to another part of Los Angeles last month because they could be with trendy singers and all that, and that didn't come off. And now we've got this thing. I think he's just trying to get his father to feel very uncomfortable, because if Harry is there and he finds out what's going on, he can sell it off, or he can do it before. If we come to November, when we've got all the army and the people, all that, he won't do his on the same day. He'll do it before, he'll do it afterwards. He'll do it in a special way, get all the cameras. And I think it's all... I hate to make him such a sort of nasty piece of work, but I think that's what he's become. And I was remembering, looking something in my biography of him, and he said, you know, my mother encouraged me to be mischief and to be naughty, because she said that she was very naughty. And that's why I made friends at Eton with all the very naughty boys. And I thought, actually, he's still a naughty boy. He's not actually grown up enough to understand that he can actually... he needs to respect his father. And I thought that the King made a very subtle speech about, you know, this is a great country, we must be tolerant, we must understand each other, listen to each other. And I thought this was for Harry as well as for all the problems that we've got. And I think he's just going to be a real difficult man.
But you wrote the biography, his biography. You met him and everything. You thought he was wonderful, though.
Yes, he was wonderful. He was a very different man. I spent 15 months with him, so I got to know him extremely well. And he was talking an awful lot about climate change, and he would work with this with his father, and he believes in this. And he set up this, what's it called, Travelist in 2019. And his whole thing was to help us, you know, understand what's going on in the countries and not go and take too much when you're flying, you see.
Well,
now that's gone. Well, that's what I'm saying.
I think it's a Bombardier, isn't it? That's like a private jet that emits...
This is completely gone now.
Yeah.
He took a private planes from America to the Caribbean when there's loads and loads of regular planes. He didn't have to do that. He had 7 SUV cars which had to go around a very small square when he and Meghan went for the year's sort of mental health. And so for him, he's not interested anymore. I think they should get rid of him. He's still their patron.
When you say get rid of him, as in get rid of him from the top of the head of this charity?
Yes, he's their patron. How can you have a patron that doesn't take any interest in what anybody else is doing? And he can do things that other people can't. I don't think that that's right. Why should you listen to somebody who's actually going on flights and planes and cars that guzzle up oil and all the rest of it when it could be helped.
Well, to be honest, though, I mean, if it was me, I'd be more than happy with 7 SUVs and all that stuff. But I'm not preaching about the climate. I've got to be quick, Angela, because I've got to move on. But I wanted to ask you about the posters about the Middleton's finance, the pictures there.
They've gone up on the trees around where they live in Berkshire. Now, they had this party pieces and it all went wrong.
I remember,
and it was about £2 million to get it right. But I think it's a shame because I think that Mrs Middleton has done a great deal for William, given him an idea of what a happy family is like, and looked after little Charles. Not Charles.
They're a lovely family, though. And
they are a lovely family, and they produced a beautiful princess.
Brilliant woman.
And I don't think that everyone should attack them for something that they're obviously very disappointed about.
Well, listen, Angela, thank you so much for coming in to talk to me. Really good to talk to you. Good to see you back on our screens with a Royal Roundup. She'll be back next week. But now, I want to return to the breaking news that's been announced. The legendary England football player Bobby Charlton has died at the age of 86 after a long illness. Joining us now is television sports presenter Gary Newborn. And Gary, you've met Sir Bobby Charlton many times. Talk to me about him.
Yes, I knew him very well. He was a terrific guy, a wonderful footballer, one of the greatest of all time in this country, of course, and a 66 World Cup hero. The last time I worked with Bobby was during my ITV days before I joined Sky. In the 2002 World Cup, he walked around the whole stadium at the final for me so that he could give me an interview right at the start of the programme. He was a real gentleman and always very helpful. And on Manchester United matches as well, he was so proud to still be with the club as a director for many years. When I did the European matches as the interviews there, he always came and had a chat. In fact, he used to join in the training with the players, even at quite an age. So a remarkable guy, a real hero forever, and a terrific guy. I'll tell you one thing, though. He obviously didn't drink very much because I was at school with John Motson, who worked for the BBC, of course. And in the Mexico World Cup, we took him out for lunch, but he was a bit of a lightweight. He left quite early, really, because he was sensible. And, you know, he always conducted himself as a gentleman. He had great dignity and a great presence.
You see, you can tell that, you know, when somebody like that dies, the amount of love that is out there for him is quite incredible, really. So you know that he was someone who had a very, you know, positive energy about him. If you were to pick your best moment with him or your best thought of him, what would that be?
Well, as I say, he was very dignified off it, a real gentleman. Very careful what he said, and you know, an absolute win. On the field, the two things that I'm going to remember him for, obviously the 66 World Cup goals. I was 21 at the time, a young journalist, so I wasn't actually working on the World Cup like everyone else glued to the television set. And also when Sir Matt Busby finally won the European Cup as manager, and Bobby was very involved in that as well. So those are two great memories. But my overall memory of Sir Bobby was that he was a real gentleman with great dignity off the field after a fabulous career as a player.
Well, listen, Gary, thank you so much for joining me. Really good to talk to you. That's Gary Newborn. He's met Bobby Charlton, who died today. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, of course, Manchester United, Sir Bobby Charlton's old team have released a statement on his passing. Manchester United are in mourning following the passing of Sir Bobby Charlton, one of the greatest and most loved players in the history of our club. Sir Bobby was a hero to millions, not just in Manchester or the United Kingdom, but wherever football is played around the world. He was admired as much for his sportsmanship and integrity as he was for his outstanding qualities as a footballer. Sir Bobby will always be remembered as a giant of the game. The club's heartfelt sympathies are with his wife, Lady Norma, his daughters and grandchildren, and all who loved him. Of course, that was Sir Bobby Charlton, who died today at the age of 86. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Keep your thoughts and messages coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. There's loads more to come in the next hour. Fatima Whitbread will be live in the studio for my difficult conversation. We'll hear all about her, plus my Great British Debate. Stay tuned. That's on the way. Well, it is coming up to 5 o'clock. This is Britain's news channel. For the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up on this week's Difficult Conversation, I'm very excited to say that I'll be joined by former javelin world champion Fatima Whitbread. Fatima Whitbread will be talking about her traumas and the triggers and her campaign for children. Then later on in the hour, the time for the Great British Debate, and I'll be asking, is Joe Biden fit to be the leader of the free world? But first, let's get your latest news headlines with Lisa.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB Newsroom. The UK is calling on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation in violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
Trucks carrying humanitarian aid have now reached southern Gaza. It's after the Rafah crossing on the border with Egypt was opened for the first time in 2 weeks. Israel imposed a blockade preventing the delivery of food, water and fuel after the Hamas terror attack. The group says today's delivery won't be enough to change the catastrophic medical conditions on the Strip. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the peace summit Palestinians need more help.
Full trucks on one side, empty stomachs on the other. Those trucks need to move as quickly as possible in a massive, sustained and safe way from Egypt into Gaza. A 20-truck convoy of the Egyptian Red Crescent is moving today. And I want to express my deep gratitude to Egypt for the essential role Egypt is playing in this regard. But the people of Gaza need a commitment for much, much more. A continuous delivery of aid to Gaza at the scale that is needed.
Meanwhile, Israel's Prime Minister has vowed to continue to fight until all the hostages being held by Hamas are freed. It's after 2 American citizens, Judith Raanan and her 17-year-old daughter, Natalie, were released yesterday. Hamas says the decision was made on humanitarian grounds. It's believed more than 200 people are still being held by the terrorist group. In the UK, there's been a large pro-Palestinian rally. The Met Police estimate... They estimate up to 100,000 people took part in the march through central London. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. Palestine Solidarity Campaign Director Ben Jamal says enough is enough.
We want the violence to end, so we're calling for an immediate ceasefire so that necessary humanitarian aid can be safely delivered to the people of Gaza. We are here today to assert the truth that violence will ultimately not end until you address the root causes of violence, and that is Israel's decades-long imposition of a system of military occupation and apartheid upon the people of Palestine. And we are marching to Downing Street to deliver a message to our political leadership that you need to end your complicit support for this system of oppression.
In other news, tributes are being paid to Sir Bobby Charlton, who has died at the age of 86. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. His family said Sir Bobby passed away peacefully in the early hours of this morning. In a statement, United described him as one of the greatest and most beloved players in the history of the club. The Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. London North Eastern Railway is advising people not to travel today because of severe disruption across the country. The Met Office also issued a red weather warning for Aberdeenshire and Angus. That's due to end at 6 o'clock. Weather journalist Nathan Rowell says that this level of alert is extremely rare.
We often talk about the Met Office issuing warnings for weather. They don't issue red weather warnings lightly. This means there is a danger to life and certainly a danger of disruption within the warning area, which is still in place across eastern Scotland until this evening. And there are also some other amber, slightly lower level of warning.
Recycling in England will be standardised from 2026. The plan will see homes, businesses and schools recycling the same materials. There will also be a once-a-week minimum food waste collection to reduce the amount going to landfill. It's all part of the government's drive to simplify the process. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Nana.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy, and also former Labour advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. Still to come, my difficult conversation today is all about the campaign to get tens of thousands of children out of the care system and into loving homes. I'll be speaking to former javelin world champion Fatima Whitbread on trauma, triggers and her campaign for children. She'll be live in the studio. Then it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is Biden fit to be the leader of the free world? The White House once again had to walk back on a comment made by Biden saying the president did not fully hear the question after he agreed that Israel should delay a Gaza ground assault until more hostages can escape. Well, as ever, you can get in touch. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. But first, let's return to the breaking news that legendary England football player Bobby Charlton has died at the age of 86. Our reporter Ellie Costello looks back at his life and career.
The greatest moment in English football. Sir Bobby Charlton following captain Bobby Moore to collect the 1966 World Cup trophy from the Queen at Wembley. The defining moment in the career of one of England's greatest footballers.
I'm a football romantic. I love football, and there are millions like me, to which this place is the focal point of the whole world. You know, you speak to people like Pelé, and Beckenbauer, and the highlight of their careers was when they played at Wembley for the first time.
Born the son of a coal miner in Northumberland in 1937, Bobby said the only choices open to him were the mines, the Navy or football. Thankfully for the world, he pursued the latter. Charlton's death leaves Sir Geoff Hurst as the only surviving member of the team that won the World Cup. At just 20 years old, a young Bobby Charlton was one of the Busby babes involved in the 1958 Munich air crash. He survived, although 23 lives were lost, including those of 8 United team members. Up until his own death, he remained the last surviving member of that crash.
A fine centre, and Bobby Charlton slams the ball home.
Bobby Charlton was named in the England squad for 4 World Cups. At the time of his retirement from the England team in 1970, he was the nation's most capped player, having turned out 106 times at the highest level. With 249 goals, he was Manchester United's highest all-time goal scorer for more than 40 years. He was also England's highest goal scorer for 45 years. In a glittering career, Sir Bobby won 3 league championships, an FA Cup and a European Cup with Manchester United. He remained a director at the club for many years.
Bobby Charlton was the player who gave us that elite world-class quality which enables you to go and win tournaments. And don't forget the soccer school. David Beckham was brought to the attention by his participation and involvement in the Bobby Charlton Soccer School.
In 1994, Charlton became Sir Bobby when he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth, and he continued to act as an ambassador for British sport.
I'm a footballer and didn't just tried my best and hoped that my ability was good enough to get me some success, which I've been lucky enough to have done.
He helped to promote London's successful bid for the 2012 Olympics.
This is such a fun place, and people love London. People love London, and we get them here, and we'll give them such a fantastic time.
In his personal life, Bobby Charlton married his wife, Norma Ball, in 1961. They had 2 daughters, Suzanne and Andrea. In November 2020, it was revealed that Sir Bobby Charlton had been diagnosed with dementia, as did several of his 1966 teammates. He stepped back from public life and has rarely been seen in recent years. Sir Bobby Charlton will remain a name synonymous with the beautiful game.
Sir Bobby Charlton, who died today. If you just tuned in, welcome aboard. It's just coming up to 10 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, moving on to another story that caught my eye today. Migrants are now returning to the Bibi Stockholm barge despite protests at the port gates. The vessel, which has a capacity to house 500 men awaiting their asylum application outcomes, were evacuated in August after Legionella bacteria was found in the water supply. However, the Home Office has said that the water supply is now safe and secure. So is the government right to send the migrants back to the Bibi Stockholm barge? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Lizzie Cundy and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider. James Schneider, I want to start with you. Were they right to get them back on the barge?
No, of course not. I mean, the whole policy is incredibly stupid, wrong-headed, as well as being cruel and unpleasant. I mean, you've got 170,000 cases. That's the number of people in the backlog. And putting a few hundred onto an unsafe barge isn't going to deal with that. What you need to do is to get through the backlog, which means hiring more caseworkers, interpreters, translators, and going through and working out what rights people have, who needs support and who doesn't. And this barge is just a bit of cruel theatre to try to make the government look like it's doing something.
Hang on a minute. Well, you're calling it cruel theatre.
Yes,
well, let's
because
get this
it
straight.
is.
So we had people who worked on rigs who would sleep on that barge, which nothing wrong with that. Bear in mind, there's, 30 of them, or not even 50 of them, and you had ex-army or soldiers sleeping on the barge. There was not a problem with it. Why is there a problem? Why is it cruel theatre to put people on a barge where they're fully... They've got all the accommodation, they've got heat, they've got light, they've got food, and they've got freedom to leave the barge?
So I used 2 words there, cruel and theatre. So the reason why it's cruel is they want to put 500 people on it, which is way more than...
But there's not 500 people on it.
No, I know, but that's what they want, is to put 500 people, which is way more than had that before, which is why, for example, the Fire Brigades Union, human rights organisations have said that it's not safe at that level. That's why there was the bacteria in the water supply with Legionnaires. Right, so that's the cruel bit. And the theatre bit...
They didn't do the Legionnaires on purpose.
No, sure. You know. Yeah, fine. But it shows that it's not really very sensible policy. And then you go and then you go for the theatre. It's only theatre because it's not dealing with the actual issue. If you have 170,000 cases and instead of dealing with those cases as quickly as you can and having policies which are going to help you do that, you do some big thing over here which can get loads of media attention, which is this barge. That is theatre. So it's cruel theatre.
I tell you, the only thing that is cruel, James, is our own homeless out on the streets. The veterans aren't being looked after. This barge, and I don't know whether you've been on it, but I've seen lots of pictures of it, has got a snooker room, TV. You know, they've got shelter, nice bed, they've got food, much more than our own veterans that are lying on the street, aren't getting looked after. Let me finish. This is costing, OK, 20,000 a day. It's been there floating about for 3 months. And look, people say it's like a gimmick, you know, it's going to be like Waterworld with Kevin Costner, all these sort of barges floating about. But it's giving shelter, food. They're allowed to leave when they wish. It's not they're not imprisoned on there. And I'm sorry, they've got even a snooker room. How can you say it's cruel? James, know your facts, get it right, it's not cruel.
So the asylum seekers on the boat are not responsible for the travesty that there are veterans sleeping on our streets. That's the responsibility of the government. It's not the responsibility of people, for example, who fled Afghanistan from one of those wars.
So where is your sympathy for them then?
My sympathy for homeless veterans is total. They should be given housing immediately. They should be given mental health support. They should be given job opportunities and full training. All things which were in Labour's manifesto last time and the time before.
I get the list, but I think, having seen some of the veterans and spoken to many of them on Facebook and things like that, that they would be happy on the Bibby Stockholm and they wouldn't be complaining, you see. And there are homeless people who would be happy on the Bibby Stockholm.
Why are we pitting?
Let me finish, James. So I'm just saying that why some people would be worried about migrants who have been given shelter and accommodation and food, why would you be concerned of them being on a barge that is perfectly safe? There's only under 50 of them.
Why are we pitting homeless people and veterans on the one side against asylum seekers and refugees on the other?
That's not really pitting them, is it?
That makes absolutely no sense.
Why does it make sense? You said it makes sense.
Yes,
that's to point out that we should have a duty of care to the people, the veterans who fought for this country, well before the migrants. But if we give the migrants somewhere to live, like a barge or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly fine.
And if you were fleeing a war-torn country, if you were fleeing a war-torn country, you'd be so grateful for being safe, for having food, a roof over your head, let alone TVs in a snooker room.
And Wi-Fi. And iPad.
And Wi-Fi. My goodness.
Well, you say that, but there's plenty of people in this country who don't have Wi-Fi, can't
yes,
afford
and
Wi-Fi.
who should have Wi-Fi.
Yes.
Now, stop pitting veterans against refugees, some of whom from the wars that our veterans were sent off to fight. Stop pitting them against each other.
No,
because
I'm not going to listen to that.
We can absolutely afford to house our veterans as we should. Absolutely, it is a disgrace that they are not housed, and
it is a disgrace.
And deal in a sensible and humane way with the asylum backlog that we have. These two things could both be dealt with simultaneously.
See, I'm not pitting them. I'm saying that they should be thankful, and it should be great that they have somewhere that is safe, and dry, and they have food and water and shelter. And the Bibby Stockholm is costing us a fortune as a taxpayer. Lizzie, last word.
3 billion a year it's costing us. 3 billion a year, James, you have to see, and they should be grateful. They are safe. And if they were that worried leaving their own country, relatives, because they were scared for their life, they should be very grateful.
And also, if you've got room in your house, perhaps you could house somebody there. Seeing as the Bibby Stockholm's not good enough, what's your alternative? Very briefly, you've got about 10 seconds. Where would you house them?
As I've said, we need to process the cases quickly.
OK, no answer. Process the
cases. No, that is an answer. Stop. No, that is an answer.
You've got 10 seconds.
There absolutely is an answer. We have and as I said right at the very beginning, we have 170,000 backlog. The cases are not being dealt with. 10 years ago, they were all dealt with.
I asked a simple question.
So, James, you wouldn't house one yourself.
Sorry, where would you house them?
Firstly, wherever we can, and we should.
Where?
Wherever we can, but the point is they shouldn't need to be housed for that long because they should be processed within 6 months. Their cases should be dealt with within 6 months.
With former javelin world champion Fatima Whitbread, thank you very much for a brilliant panel. James, and also the fabulous Lizzie Cundy. But Fatima Whitbread will be back after this.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you. My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, 22 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's now time for this week's difficult conversation. Now, Fatima Whitbread is a former javelin world champion who, as a baby, was abandoned in a flat in London and left to die. When neighbours heard her cries, the police were called and she was sent to hospital to recover from malnutrition and dehydration. After her recovery, Fatima spent her childhood in a children's home. But when she was only 11, she was raped by a man staying in the flat. However, Fatima did not let that abuse take over. Once she was adopted, Whitbread began training hard. The former world champion would train 3 times a day for 7 days a week. And in 1979, Fatima Whitbread was crowned European Junior Champion, becoming the first British woman to hold the title. And after her career, the sports personality star, she's enjoyed a successful reality TV career, taking part in I'm a Celebrity and Celebrity SAS, Who Dares Wins. And I'm very delighted to say that Fatima joins me now to talk about triggers, traumas and her campaign for children. Fatima Whitbread, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Nana, for having me. I'm really delighted to be here, and I really want to get down to business because it's so important that we start to look after our young children, our young vulnerable children in the care system, and that's what I'm doing. That's my ministry at the moment. I've launched a Fatima's UK campaign. That's to help children in the care system to build platforms to give them a voice so they can be seen and heard. We should be celebrating them. They're quite resilient children, you know, I mean, but at the same time, not a huge amount has changed as far as the care system goes in terms of when I was in care back in the 60s to what it is now. And I still get very upset when I see children move from home to home, foster care home to home, and outside from the schooling that they are to another county. It's so disruptive to those children and also emotionally unsettling for them. So, you know, for me, I mean, it's all about trying to help create a legacy to help these future generations beyond ours, you know, and hopefully, you know, Fatima's campaign's going to do just that.
Well, can we come back to your story then, to your personal story So when you were very, very small, you were abandoned. That's so sad. Aww.
Well, abandoned as a baby, some would say left to die. As you said,
Yeah.
a neighbour heard the baby cry. Now, of course, the police came, banged the door down after 2 days with nobody coming or going. And I was made a ward of court, and I spent the next 14 years of my life in children's homes. The first 5 years was spent in Hertfordshire with 25 other children. And I can remember at 5 years old, we were playing in the front room, and anyone who came to the car park area, which we overlooked, I'd always say, "Is that my mummy coming to get me?"
Aww.
And I think a lot of the children felt that way. They were very vulnerable. They come with a lot of trauma. You know, it's something that happens with our young children in the care system, and we need to look after them. It's time that we all got together and supported these children, give them love and support in homes that they need, you know, and give them the security. Every child has a right to a safe and happy childhood.
So you grew up in care. So this care home that you were in, did you stay in this care home or were you moved about? And what was your experience of the care system?
Well, at 5 years old, I was called by the matron of the home. "Fatima, be down here in the reception area at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. You're going to move to a new children's home to live with your half-brother and sister, and your mother's coming with your social worker to take you." Well, I'd never been told that I had a mother or brothers or sisters, and yeah, it was quite a shock. 5 years old, that's a lot to process.
Was that your real mum and your...
And that was the biological mum,
Really?
yeah. And, yeah, sadly, I mean, for me, I mean, she never spoke to me when she arrived at the home. And I can remember the social worker was full of the joys of spring. I didn't know which was which because I naturally gravitated, as kids do, because it comes to mind, this was a happy lady, that must be my mummy, instead of obviously the lady with the black curly hair, with, you know, obviously the Greek-looking origin. I didn't put those two things together, as children never do. You know, that was my perception. This was a happy lady that was smiling and making contact with me, but the other woman never spoke to me once. And in fact, the whole journey down, I cried.
Really? So what happened? You went with your mother and your half-brother and sister?
Yeah, so when I moved to another children's home, and this is the point I make about a lot of the children in the care system, once they're moved constantly, it's very unsettling. And for me, that was no different because I was leaving a children's home, which was my family. You know, the children were my family. And, of course, I wasn't there long in the new children's home, and the biological mum, she grabbed me by the throat. She says, "Oh, you look after your sister, I cut your throat." And I thought, oh, you know, I mean, at 5 years old, that was quite scary. And then she was supposed to be taking the family back to integrate as a family. And we got halfway down the road, and unfortunately, she was poking me with her elbow in my ribs, and she said, "You go, we don't want you. Off, we don't want you." Oh, no. And I kind of, like, didn't know whether to laugh or cry because I'd had this big half-a-crown coin in my hand, and I didn't want to go in the first place. But then again, you know, I was upset because I'd started to think maybe this was an opportunity for me to have a family, but it wasn't to be. And for a lot of children that are in the care system, Nana, you know, there's a lot of emotional disturbances, a lot of trauma that comes through in their lives, and what we need to give them is stability. Give them the opportunity of security in their life.
So how did you eventually get adopted? Because I know you were adopted. What's the story there?
Through sport. Sport was my saviour, and I think for a lot of us young children, we need to give them a focus. It's really important to remember this, you know, that they have the opportunity to feel a sense of belonging and connect with people. So keep them off the streets, keep them out of the wrong, you know, hands of the wrong people and out of crime. And I think we'll have a lot better communities if we do that, if we work together to do that. For me, sport was my saviour, and that's through a netball match. My team were sort of doing well. I was motivating them. Today you'd call us motivators, but then it was like a pain in the arse, someone who was talking too loud on the court, and the whistle went and the umpire said, "Young lady, keep that noise down, otherwise you'll be off." So I kind of looked and I started. The match was going 12 or 13, 12, 14, or it was a cup match, and I'd already, you know, played exceptionally well, and I wanted to win my first medal. And of course, my voice started rising again, and The whistle went, the umpire said, "I've told you once before, if I have to tell you again, you'll be off." And, of course, as I turned, I started to mutter, and, of course, the team captain said, "Oh, Fats, be careful, she's quite strict." Well, that was the end of the match, and I said to my friend Alma, who lived in the children's home around the corner, "Alma, let's go to the local athletic club. It's this athletic season." And, of course, we went. Alma went off to the sprinters, and I saw this tall, blonde guy throwing what looked like a spear. So I walked across to him, and I picked the spear up, or went to pick it up, and he said, "You're not allowed to do that." So I said, "Why not?" So he said to the shot put coach, turned to the shot put coach and said, "Can you look after this young lady?" So he said, come to the stand. He said, "Wait for the javelin coach, and then you can try throwing the javelin." And of course, I sat in the stand, toe-tapping, like a lot of us kids, you know, survivors that we are. And in came the mini, pulled in, and of course, he said, "Here comes the javelin coach." And as I sat there looking, I thought, "Oh no, it's that same woman on the net before." Oh my God, yeah. And I thought, she's never going to let me compete, you know, let me throw the javelin. So for me, it was, you know, a chance, a fate meeting that brought me to meet my mother, Margaret, and became a Whitbread.
Of course,
You know,
so she adopted you.
She adopted me, but there's a longer story to that. I mean, obviously, when she started to show, I showed some talent in the event, she used to say to me, "You've got some talent," she said, "young lady. Why don't you ask Mum and Dad to come up?" She said, "and we can talk about getting you some javelins and, you know, boots." And I just nodded my head. And with that, she said, "Jack, has Fatima got a hearing problem?" So Jack said, "No, why?" He said, "Well, whenever I talk about Mum and Dad, you know, she's just nodding her head." "Ah," he said, "don't you realise she's from the children's homes?"
Oh.
So with that, obviously, she brought a spear and a javelin boots up the next week. And she said, "These boots might be a couple of sizes too big. Stuff them with paper," she said, "and, you know, here's a javelin." And I couldn't wait to get back to the children's home so I could show the auntie, the house auntie, the German students that looked after us in the summer. I said, "Come out in the garden, let me show you how I throw this javelin." It took a couple of throws to get it up in the garden, the end of the vegetable patch. So I threw the potato off and I said, "Now, I'm going to give it a really big throw this time." And of course I didn't. It went smash through the French windows.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And of course, you know, I said, "Oh, don't worry, Ingrid, stick it with sellotape, I'll be fine." No, and I got a month's ban when the house parents came back. And of course, Mrs. Whitbread got a message through to Mrs. Whitbread thinks you've bunked off with the javelin and the boots and you're not interested anymore. So with that, I got up at 2 o'clock one morning and I went down to the French Bureau to get an envelope out, and I said, "Dear Mrs. Whitbread, sorry I cannot come to the track to throw my javelin anymore." I said, "Only I've smashed the French windows, but one day I want to be the best javelin thrower in the world." And I stuck it down. I put Mrs. Whitbread, St Chad School. Next day I posted it. And it took about 2 weeks, and I thought, she's not going to, you know, because, I mean, I couldn't do any sports after-school activities. I couldn't see my Auntie Ray, who was, you know, one of our housekeepers and was looking after us kids and humanised us, and she was lovely. And so I waited, and then I heard the phone call, and it was, no, she can't come, she's been ever so naughty. And with that, Mrs. Whitbread must have been quite persuasive. Within a couple of weeks, I was back at the track throwing the javelin, and then she asked me, would I like to meet the family? Oh. And then I met the family, and after that, she said, would you like to come and stay with us for a couple of weeks during the summer? And then when Greg, my youngest brother, because I had two brothers, they were only 4 and 2, and Greg said, oh, Mum, do we have to take Fatima back to the shop? And then after that, of course, my mum said, would you like to come and live with us?
I'm so pleased for you. Is she still alive now?
Yeah, she's still alive.
Still
yeah, and
she's
she's very proud of the fact that my ministry is to go and support our young children in the care system. As I say, Fatima's campaign, UK campaign. If you're out there and you're listening and you want to be helping me to support it financially, and you've got money, please come and find me.
And where will they find you?
They'll find me at champ.international1@gmail.com.
God, you didn't make it easy for yourself. You will find Fatima Whitbread. Find her and definitely get in touch if you can help. Thank you so much, Fatima Whitbread. Brilliant.
Thank you,
legend,
Nana.
Former javelin world champion. Well, if you've just joined me, welcome on board. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue to pay our respects to Sir Bobby Charlton, sports broadcaster. Aidan McGee will join me in just a moment time. But first, let's get your latest news with Lisa.
It's 5:35. I'm Lisa Hartle in the GB newsroom. The UK is calling on Israel to show military restraint in its war with Hamas. Addressing a peace summit in Egypt, the Foreign Secretary said he's spoken to the Israeli government about its duty to respect international law and the importance of preserving civilian lives. James Cleverly also told the conference efforts need to be made to prevent an escalation in violence.
We have a duty to work together to prevent instability from engulfing the region and claiming yet more lives. We must work together to prevent the tragic situation in Gaza becoming a regional conflict, because that is exactly what Hamas wants.
In the UK, the Met Police estimates up to 100,000 people took part in a pro-Palestinian march through central London. They're calling for an end to the conflict in the Middle East and demanding the government stop supporting Israel's actions. In other news, tributes are being paid to Sir Bobby Charlton, who has died at the age of 86. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. His family said he passed peacefully in the early hours of this morning. Sir Geoff Hurst, now the last of the 1966 team, said he'll be sorely missed by all of the country. The Environment Agency is warning floods are likely to continue near major rivers in England until Tuesday. Storm Babette is dumping heavy rain in parts of the East Midlands and South Yorkshire. London North Eastern Railway is advising people not to travel because of severe disruption across the country. And you can get more on all of these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Nana.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Akua, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Good afternoon. Just coming up to 20 minutes to 6 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. We are the People's Channel. Let's bring you some more of the sad news that Sir Bobby Charlton has passed away at the age of 86. He was a key member of England's World Cup winning team in 1966 and a club legend at Manchester United. So joining me now is sports broadcaster and journalist Aidan McGee. Aidan, it's really good to talk to you. Sad but expected news in a sense, because we knew that he was sick. But talk to me about what kind of a player he was and what kind of a man he was.
Well, Nana, I mean, it depends how you compartmentalise his life, really. I mean, if we strip it back right to the very beginning, he was born in Ashington in the northeast as part of a footballing family, really. I mean, Jackie Milburn had played with distinction for the local club, Newcastle United, but he and his brother Jack, his older sibling Jack, who he played alongside in the 1966 World Cup final for England. They're the pictures you can see on your screen now of the two of them walking up to collect their medals. They moved on. Jack moved to Leeds United, where he had a stellar career, winning the league title. And Bobby Charlton even went further, because not only did he win 3 league titles with Manchester United, he also won the European Cup. And think about the if you will, the Busby Babes back in 1958. He was on that plane. He was one of the few survivors of that team that perished on the runway on the tarmac in Munich. And his brother Jack always said he was never quite the same person after that. He was always a little bit more reserved. But one thing he did do, in the football sense, is he recovered as part of that team. He rebuilt that legacy. And 10 years later, in 1968, they won the European Cup, as you can see on the screen now as well. I think they're the pictures of the 1968 European Cup final at Wembley, when they beat Benfica by 4-1. So, to my knowledge, I think I'm right in saying that he's the only English player to have won the World Cup and the European Cup. That sets him apart from anybody else. As you say, he was one of a dwindling number anyway of the World Cup winners from the 66. I interviewed him back in 2012, just before the Olympics. He was a charming individual. We didn't really chat much about football. We were both living in Manchester at the time. And although the interview took place in London, we were chatting about life in general. And he was very, very good to me. He was very giving of his time. And he was a perfect ambassador for the Olympics at that time as well, having not actually competed in the Olympics himself. And then if you look at his numbers as well, you have to consider, in terms of his position as a player, before Bobby Charlton, midfielders didn't really score that many goals. They didn't get forward. But if you look at his record, 249 goals in 758 appearances for Manchester United, 106 caps for England, 49 goals. That record only eclipsed in 2016, September 2016, I think it was, by Wayne Rooney. Those are truly outstanding numbers at a time when it was more difficult to record those numbers, because the position of the player meant that from midfield, you didn't get in as many goal-scoring positions. So we're talking here about the very, very, very best, the elite of English football, and he'll be toasted and he'll be celebrated quite rightly in the coming days for that reason.
Aidan, thank you very much. That's Aidan McGee. Thank you. Well, Manchester United, Sir Bobby Charlton's old team, have released a statement on his passing. Manchester United are in mourning following the passing of Sir Bobby Charlton, one of the greatest and most beloved players in the history of our club. Sir Bobby was a hero to millions, not just in Manchester or the United Kingdom, but wherever football is played around the world. He was admired as much for his sportsmanship and integrity as he was for his outstanding qualities as a footballer. Sir Bobby will always be remembered as a giant of the game. The club's heartfelt sympathies are with his wife, Lady Norma, his daughters and grandchildren, and all who loved him. Just coming up to 44 minutes after 5 o'clock. If you just joined me, welcome on board. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is Joe Biden fit to be the leader of the free world? The White House once again had to walk back on a comment made by Biden, saying the president did not fully hear the question after he agreed that Israel should delay a Gaza ground assault until more hostages can escape. Now, this comes after another embarrassing gaffe by the 46th president, where Biden claimed that he saw children beheaded by Hamas, which the White House had to later row back on. And, of course, this follows a number of awkward media moments, whether he's falling asleep, the president falling over, shaking hands with the air, or not knowing where to go. I mean, let's take a look at some of these moments.
I never really thought that I would see and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. We're facing an inflection point in history. One of those moments where the decisions we make today are going to determine the future for decades to come. Iran is supporting Russia in Ukraine, and it's supporting Hamas and other terrorist groups in the region.
Ban the Department of Justice from enforcing civil rights laws. Ban pride flags from flying on public lands. Who the hell? Oh.
So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is Biden fit to be the leader of the free world? Well, joining me now to discuss, Greg Svensson, the chairman of Republicans Overseas, Peter Spencer, political correspondent, Suzanne Evans, political commentator. Right, well, I'm going to start with you, Greg. Is he fit to be leader of the free world?
Unfortunately, no. He's clearly not fit, and you could see it in his frail delivery. You could see it in the challenges to his cognitive ability. The problem with our system is he's the president we have. So even though I don't think he's fit to be the leader of the free world, especially at moments like this, we don't have the ability to call a snap election. This is President Biden is going to be our president for another year or a year and a few months.
I just have no idea why anybody thought that he would be fit to run as president in the first instance. But I suppose there was that anything but Trump mentality. Suzanne Evans.
I think it's quite sad, actually, what we're seeing. I mean, he's without a shadow of a doubt a shadow of his younger self. When you think how competent and capable he was as a younger man, it's really quite sad to see him now. But I think, as we've just heard, he's going to carry on being president, I think. I don't see any possibility of him standing down. My concern is that he wants to stand again. I think that's absolute madness. He's already talked, about he's going to run again, but it hasn't been announced yet. Remember that particular gaffe. I would be the last person to say that politicians should be young. I think you have to strike a balance between experience and life experience and youthful ability. But I think for anyone, really, 80 is far too old. And I'd say the same about former President Donald Trump, who's also wants to stand again. He's 77 now. He's going to be Biden's age very shortly. I'd say the same thing about him too. But I think Biden has just had so many gaffes, so many times where he's frozen up, lost his train of thought, slurred his words, become incomprehensible, gets facts wrong. And that's the really worrying thing, the sheer amount of facts he's got wrong. And even when he's got a scripted speech now, he can't seem to read the teleprompter. It really is inconceivable that he should stand again.
I just need to bring Peter Spencer and Peter.
Sure. I mean, the point is made, and it's a valid point, that back in the day he was a formidable force. But that's back in the day. I mean, I hate to use the A word, but for God's sake, the guy's even older than I am and still alive, which is quite comfortable in this sort of way. But the fact remains, it's quite a tricky job being the leader of the free world. He's got the state apparatus to back him up, but still, he is the face of it. And as the point has been made repeatedly, he's always stumbling either in what he's saying or getting on and off podiums or whatever. And of course, this comes at a particularly dangerous, fraught time in geopolitics, for heaven's sake. We've got the Russians and we've got the Chinese and da. And OK, Queen Victoria wasn't quite in the finest of fettle towards the end of her reign, but she wasn't running the country, whereas in theory, this man is. Well, empires come.
Well, you can see people are on tenterhooks when he's speaking, like when he was talking to the Israelis.
Absolutely,
everyone was just saying, please don't mess it up. Yeah. And he did mess it up a little bit. You guys, you can tell it was the other guys, so that was pretty bad. Yeah. But Peter, anyway, thank you so much for joining.
Can I just make one?
Well, you've got 5 seconds, Peter.
5 seconds, OK. It's very likely him pitted against Trump, who is a convicted sex offender and
all
accused of all manner of fraud.
I'm going to have to stop you there because I don't know about all of that. I don't know whether you're right with all of that. I don't know whether that's all been verified. Right, so Peter Spencer, thank you very much, Greg Swenson, and also the lovely Suzanne Evans. Right, so let's see what my panel make of that, because I'm joined by broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy and also former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, James Schneider, and also, Greg, I thought we'd keep you in because he's good value. Right, so I'm going to start with you, James Schneider. Is he fit to run the free world, if that's what he's doing?
I don't mind either way, because the free world is code for US-led empire, so wars, coups and economic domination, and I would like to be independent of that. So I would like Britain to have an independent foreign policy, for us to not be like our Prime Minister to be like, you know, the motorway service stations, and there's a little toy car that you can put a quid in and you can put your child in and they go like that and they think they're driving the car.
You get them in supermarkets.
I want to have a real car. I don't want to be driving the car and have the so-called free world overseeing. So I want to be independent, and so...
So you agree with Brexit then? You will vote for Brexit then?
Freedom.
Freedom.
I didn't vote for Brexit because that would mean we'd leave the EU under the Tories, who are going to mess it up terribly, which they've done.
Independent. That's why I suggested it. If you're with the EU, then you're in that little car that you talked about outside of services. Lizzie Cundy.
Oh, for goodness sake. The man can't... You know, we watch him. We're thankful he's just standing up vertically, aren't we? He jabbers, he stammers, he loses his thread. You know, I'm really worried, not just for himself, but also, you know, how can he be the leader of the United States? It is a huge, huge worry. And look what he's done. You know, that he's already given billions to Iran, how he left Afghanistan. He's dangerous. And the USA is supposed to be the world's policeman. People follow. But sadly, Biden, he cannot run for the next office. He needs to be, you know, help.
OK, well, listen, I think we've all agreed that he ain't fit to run anything. In fact, he can't run, let's be fair. So, not being any disrespect to him, but it's true. And I don't know why everyone's pretending that he can. He needs to be removed from office instantly because it's ridiculous, it's absurd, and we all know it. Even they know it. But now it's time for the quickfire quiz, the part of the show where I test my panel with some of the other stories hitting the headlines right now. I'm joined by Lizzie Cundy. Your buzzer, please. Oh. James Schneider, your buzzer, please. And Greg, you're in. Just make a noise. Make some sort of noise. Beeps. You're going to do that. OK, please don't buzz until I finish the question. OK, let's do this. Right, he's making his debut. Right, so question number one, please play along at home. How much has the US President Joe Biden requested in foreign aid for Israel and Ukraine? Is it $100 million, $100 billion? Hang on. 100 billion or 10 billion? The only person who didn't buzz before I finished the question was you, Greg, so what's the answer?
Yeah, it's 100 million.
100 million.
Billion.
What does everyone else
sorry.
think?
Billion.
My mistake. 100 billion.
No, our first answer only.
B.
It was B.
B.
I buzzed before James.
The point for that. First answers only. The answer is, of course, it was 100 billion. Do you think that's too much? Is it too much?
Yes.
Is it too much? Is it too much?
Yes.
It's too much.
It's a big number, but it's not enough.
It's not enough? That's great.
It's not enough.
It's not enough. Question two. When did Rishi Sunak arrive in Israel for diplomatic talks? Was it A, Tuesday, C, Wednesday, or B, I hadn't said Thursday? Buzz. OK, you.
Thursday.
Thursday. And what do you think?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Everyone's saying Thursday. You should have said another day. They might be wrong.
It is Thursday day.
It is Thursday. They are right. Question three. England and Scotland have qualified for Euro 2024. What country is hosting the tournament? Is it A, Germany, B, France, or C, Belgium? James Schneider.
Germany.
Germany, he says.
It is Germany.
No idea.
No idea. No one cares. Germany. Question four. Scientists have traced the origin of the first redhead to which animal? Is it A, a goat, B, a snake, or C, a frog? Lizzie Cundy.
A, goat.
A goat.
What?
Any others?
I'm just going to go with frog.
Press your buzzer. A frog. And you?
I don't understand the question.
I don't. Well, I didn't write these. It is a frog.
Wow!
You're absolutely right.
A frog!
Yeah, you had multiple choice. When you give a multiple choice, you don't even need to understand. You just choose one.
Well, I've kissed a lot of them.
Me too. I'm still kissing them. A French train taking passengers got diverted to Disneyland due to signalling problems. Who were the passengers? Is it A, French footballers, B, Taylor Swift fans, or C, French MPs?
Got to be Taylor Swift fans.
He said Taylor Swift.
Oh, that's what I wanted to go for. It's the most amusing.
OK, well, I'll take Taylor Swift. You've got a different answer?
I'll say French MEPs, just to be different.
It's French MEPs! Oh. She was absolutely right. Well, listen, on today's show, I've been asking whether you thought that... I don't know what the answer is. It doesn't say at the end. No, I'll let you know tomorrow. But I've got to say a huge thank you to my panel broadcaster and columnist Lizzie Cundy. Lizzie Cundy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And also thank you so much to James Schneider, former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And a huge thank you to my complimentary guest, Craig Svensson, for coming in and carrying on with the quiz.
Great to be here, Nana.
And
Thanks.
a huge thank you to you at home for your company, as ever. Now, tomorrow, joining me will be the fabulous Matthew Lazar, I think it is, and also Danny Kelly. Stay tuned, stay with me. I'll see you tomorrow at 3. Have a fabulous evening, and I'll leave you with the weather. Take care. Enjoy.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. I'm Craig Snell. Well, looking ahead to Sunday, for much of the UK, it's going to be a dry day, especially for parts of Scotland, and all of us should see some sunshine. We are still dominated by this area of low pressure, so we will continue to see the risk of some showers, but we certainly will lose the heavy and persistent rain which we have seen over the last few days. The last of that will move up into parts of Orkney and Shetland overnight, so most of us seeing a drier picture. Still the risk of some showers across western parts. Over towards the east, could just see a few mist and fog patches forming, and in the countryside could see temperatures falling into mid-single figures. So we start Sunday off with potentially a few mist and fog patches, but they will quickly clear. And then for many, it is a much drier and brighter day. Still the risk of some showers across western parts. They may well just creep a little bit further east from time to time, but basically the further east you are, the greater chance of staying dry throughout the day. Temperatures in the north very similar to what we've seen recently, 10 to 12 degrees, potentially up to about 15 degrees in the south. Heading into Monday, a dry start for most, potentially a frosty start actually for Scotland. As we go through the course of the day, outbreaks of rain will come close to parts of Northern Ireland, and then later on we'll then see a band of rain working in across southern parts of England. And that really sets us up for another unsettled spell as we go towards the middle of the week.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get